In the twisted heart of Gotham City, where shadows breathe and concrete bleeds, there exists an alleyway that history forgot but never forgave. Crime Alley, a name whispered in the same breath as damnation. A scar carved into the city's flesh that refuses to heal. On this particular June night in 1981, the humid air hangs thick with the promise of violence, while neon signs flicker like dying stars above the urban decay. The Monarch Theater's marquee burns bright against the darkness, advertising Zorro, the gay blade to a city that has forgotten how to laugh without malice. Inside, 3 figures sit in red velvet seats, a family unit that represents everything Gotham's corruption seeks to destroy. Thomas Wayne, his strong jaw set with the quiet confidence of a man who has dedicated his life to healing others, watches the screen with the focused attention of someone who understands that even in fantasy, justice must be fought for. Beside him, Martha Wayne embodies grace itself, her pearl necklace catching the reflected light from the movie screen like captured moonbeams. Between them sits 8-year-old Bruce Wayne, his wide eyes drinking in every sword thrust, every heroic declaration, every moment where good triumphs over evil. The boy doesn't know that he is witnessing his last moment of true innocence. He doesn't understand that the pearls adorning his mother's throat will soon scatter like his childhood dreams across blood-stained concrete. He cannot comprehend that the hero on screen, masked, noble, fighting for justice with unwavering determination, will become the template for his own dark metamorphosis. As the credits roll and the Wayne family exits into Gotham's muggy embrace, the city itself seems to hold its breath. The theater's bright lights give way to the dim, oppressive glow of Crime Alley's few functioning street lamps. Thomas Wayne, ever the optimist despite his daily battles against Gotham's social rot, suggests the shortcut. "It's just a few blocks," he says, his voice carrying the same reassuring tone he uses with his patients at Gotham General. Martha's hand finds his, their fingers intertwining with the easy intimacy of a couple who have built their love on shared purpose and mutual respect. Young Bruce skips ahead, his mind still buzzing with images of Zorro's cape swirling in dramatic confrontations. He doesn't notice the figure emerging from the deeper shadows, a man whose desperation has curdled into something far more dangerous. Joe Chill, a name that will echo through Bruce Wayne's nightmares for decades to come, steps into the pale circle of streetlight with a gun that trembles in his grip. "Your money?" Chill demands, his voice cracking with the particular brand of cowardice that comes from a man who has already crossed too many lines to count. "Your jewelry, now." Thomas Wayne, whose hands have saved countless lives, slowly reaches for his wallet. There is no fear in his movement, only the careful calculation of a man who understands that material possessions mean nothing when weighed against his family's safety. But Martha's pearls, those pristine symbols of beauty in a city drowning in ugliness, catch Chill's desperate attention. "The necklace too, lady." Martha's hand moves instinctively to her throat, not out of greed or vanity, but from the startled reflexes of someone being robbed of something precious. It is the smallest gesture, barely a movement at all, but in Joe Chill's paranoid state, it appears threatening. The first gunshot shatters the night like breaking glass. Thomas Wayne, doctor and healer, crumples to the alley floor, his life's blood seeping between the cracks in the concrete. The second shot follows immediately, and Martha Wayne's scream cuts off mid-breath as she collapses beside her husband, her pearl necklace exploding in a cascade of white spheres that dance across the ground like fallen stars. Bruce Wayne, 8 years old and suddenly orphaned, cannot scream. The sound lodges in his throat like a physical thing, choking him with its intensity. He watches his parents die in slow motion, every detail burning itself into his memory with horrific clarity, the metallic smell of blood mixing with the alley's existing stench of decay, the way his father's hand twitches once, then goes still, the impossible angle of his mother's neck as she lies among her scattered pearls. Joe Chill, horrified by what he has done, flees into the Gotham night, leaving behind 3 lives, 2 ended, 1 forever changed. But Bruce cannot move, cannot think, cannot do anything but kneel in the growing pool of his parents' blood and feel something dark and implacable taking root in his soul. Minutes pass like hours before the sound of approaching sirens breaks through Bruce's paralysis. Detective Jim Gordon, young and still possessed of the idealism that Gotham has not yet managed to crush, is among the first on the scene. He sees the boys' mall, broken, surrounded by death and pearl sand. Something in his cop's heart fractures. Gordon removes his coat and drapes it around Bruce's shoulders, not because the night is cold, but because some gestures of human decency must be made, even in the face of absolute horror. "It's going to be okay, son," Gordon whispers, though he knows it is a lie. Nothing will ever be okay again for Bruce Wayne. The boy looks up at him with eyes that have aged decades in mere minutes, eyes that hold a promise so fierce and terrible that Gordon actually takes a step back. As the crime scene photographer's flashes illuminate the alley in stark black and white, Bruce Wayne makes his vow. Not in words, she is still too shocked for speech, but in the deepest chambers of his heart, where oaths become destiny. He will war on crime itself. He will become something that criminals fear. He will ensure that no other child ever kneels in an alley, watching their world end in blood and scattered pearls. The ambulances arrive, their red lights painting the alley walls like fresh wounds. Paramedics check for signs of life they know they will not find. Police officers string yellow tape and chalk outlines, reducing the Waynes to evidence in what will become just another unsolved Gotham murder. But they cannot quantify what has been born in this place of death. They cannot measure the darkness that has taken root in a child's soul, nor predict the legend that will grow from this moment of absolute loss. Alfred Pennyworth, the Wayne family's loyal butler, arrives to collect Bruce, his normally composed demeanor cracking, as he sees his young charge sitting in the back of Gordon's police car. The old soldier recognizes something in the boy's thousand-yard stare, the look of someone who has been to war and returned forever changed. Alfred takes Bruce's small hand in his own weathered grip and feels the tremor of barely contained fury that will drive the child for years to come. As they drive away from Crime Alley, Bruce presses his face to the car window and watches the scene recede into Gotham's neon-soaked darkness. But he is not leaving the alley. Behind it will follow him, haunt him, shape him into something unprecedented. The pearls have been bagged as evidence, but their memory will endure. The blood will be washed away by tomorrow's rain, but its stain will remain on Bruce Wayne's soul forever. In the distance, the bat signal's light will not shine for many years yet. But in this moment, as a limousine carries Gotham's newest orphan toward a destiny written in darkness, the Dark Knight is born. Not in a cave filled with bats, not in the laboratories where he will perfect his crime-fighting tools, but here, in an alley where love died and vengeance was born, where a child's innocent faith in justice transformed into something harder, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. Crime Alley has claimed its most important victims, but it has also forged its greatest enemy. The shadows that swallowed Thomas and Martha Wayne have given birth to something that will make the darkness itself afraid. Batman begins here, in blood and pearls, in a child's silent scream that will echo through Gotham's nights for decades to come. Orphan in the storm, forging the bat, Wayne Manor stands like a Gothic monument to grief against Gotham's perpetually overcast sky, its towering spires and gargoyle-adorned battlements seeming to scratch at the belly of the storm clouds above. Within its cavernous halls, silence has become a living thing, pressing against the walls and settling into every corner like accumulated dust. The laughter that once echoed through these rooms, Bruce's delighted squeals as his father chased him through the corridors, Martha's melodic voice humming while she arranged flower shows, been buried beneath a weight of sorrow so profound it seems to alter the very air. 13-year-old Bruce Wayne sits in his father's study, surrounded by medical journals and half-finished research papers that will never see completion. The boy has grown tall in the 5 years since Crime Alley, but his frame remains lean, almost gaunt, as if the intensity of his purpose has burned away any excess. His dark hair falls across eyes that hold depths no child should possess, eyes that have stared too long into the abyss of human cruelty and found it staring back. Alfred Pennyworth enters with the measured steps of a man who has learned to navigate the minefield of his young master's grief. The butler's silver hair has gained new streaks of white since that terrible night, and his ramrod's straight military posture bears the almost imperceptible slump of someone carrying a burden too heavy for one man's shoulders. He sets down a tray of untouched food, the latest in a series of meals that Bruce will ignore in favor of his obsessive studying. "Master Bruce," Alfred says, his British accent lending formality to words weighted with concern. Perhaps a walk in the gardens? The roses your mother planted are beginning to bloom. Bruce doesn't look up from the forensics textbook splayed open before him. The pages detail crime scene analysis techniques, blood spatter patterns, ballistics, evidence knowledge that no teenager should hunger for, yet which Bruce devours with the desperate intensity of a starving man at a feast. Did you know, Alfred, that most homicides in Gotham go unsolved? 63%, according to GCPD statistics. 63% of killers who will never face justice. The old butler's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. He has watched Bruce transform from a bright, laughing child into something harder and more focused than any human being should be. The boy sleeps 3 hours a night, exercises until his muscles scream in protest, and studies with the fevered concentration of someone preparing for war. Which, Alfred supposes with growing dread, is exactly what Bruce is doing. Your parents wouldn't want you to sacrifice your childhood for— My childhood ended in Crime Alley, Bruce interrupts, finally looking up with eyes that burn like coals in a face too young to hold such ancient fury. My parents are dead because I was weak, because I couldn't protect them, because I didn't have the knowledge, the strength, the skills to make a difference when it mattered most. Alfred has heard variations of this speech dozens of times, but it never loses its power to break his heart. The boy blames himself for a random act of violence, has constructed an entire worldview around his perceived failure as an 8-year-old child. No amount of reasoning can penetrate the fortress of guilt Bruce has built around his psyche. On Bruce's 15th birthday, a day that passes unmarked by celebration in Wayne Manor, he makes an announcement that changes everything. Alfred finds him in the cave system beneath the estate, a vast network of limestone chambers that Thomas Wayne had intended to convert into a wine cellar. Bruce stands at the edge of an underground lake, his breathing creating small puffs of vapor in the cold air, surrounded by hundreds of bats that hang from the cavern ceiling like living stalactites. I'm leaving, Alfred, Bruce says without preamble. Tonight. The butler's heart stops. Master Bruce, I need training. Real training. The kind I can't get in Gotham, not without attracting attention. Bruce turns, and Alfred sees that the boy has been crying, the first tears he has shed since the funeral. I'm going to find the best teachers in the world. Martial artists, detectives, escape artists, anyone who can teach me to become something more than just another victim. Alfred wants to protest, to lock the boy in his room until this madness passes, but he recognizes the futility of such actions. Bruce Wayne has been preparing for this moment since he was 8 years old, accumulating knowledge and resources with the single-minded determination of someone who knows exactly what he wants to become. The old soldier also recognizes something else in the boy's posture, the same lethal focus he once saw in the elite commandos he served alongside during the war. How long will you be gone? Alfred asks, though he dreads the answer. As long as it takes, Bruce replies. Years, maybe decades, however long it takes to become worthy of their memory. The next morning, Bruce Wayne disappears from Gotham City, as completely as if he had never existed. To the outside world, he is simply another traumatized heir, taking an extended sabbatical from his responsibilities. The truth is far more complex and infinitely more dangerous. His first stop is Tibet, where rumors speak of martial arts masters who can kill with a touch and move like shadows across mountain peaks. Bruce scales the Himalayas in winter, his body pushed beyond normal human endurance, seeking the monastery of Master Kirigi. The old man, ancient beyond measure and possessed of reflexes that seem to bend the laws of physics, initially refuses to train the young American. You carry too much anger, Kirigi observes as Bruce kneels in 3 feet of snow, having maintained the position for 6 hours while petitioning for instruction. Anger makes one predictable. Predictable warriors are dead warriors. But Bruce persists, demonstrating a capacity for suffering that impresses even the hardened monks. He learns to fight with fists, feet, and weapons, his body becoming a precision instrument capable of devastating efficiency. More importantly, he learns to control his rage, to channel it into cold, calculating purpose. The angry child who left Gotham begins to transform into something far more dangerous, a man who can kill with surgical precision while maintaining the emotional detachment of a chess master. From Tibet, Bruce travels to Paris, where he studies under Detective Harvey Harris, a retired Scotland Yard investigator whose legendary deductive abilities have made him a consultant to police forces across Europe. Harris teaches Bruce to see what others miss: the scuff mark that reveals a killer's shoe size, the pattern of blood spatter that tells the story of a struggle, the micro-expressions that betray a liar's tells. Observation without deduction is meaningless. Harris lectures as they examine a crime scene in Montmartre. But deduction without observation is fantasy. You must train your mind to be as sharp as any blade, young Wayne. Bruce absorbs these lessons with the same intensity he brought to his physical training. He learns 17 languages, masters 14 fighting styles, and develops an eidetic memory that allows him to recall the smallest details years after first observing them. But knowledge alone is not enough. He needs to test himself against real danger. In the Mediterranean, Bruce seeks out Giovanni Zatara, a master escape artist whose reputation borders on the supernatural. Zatara, a man who claims to have learned his techniques from Houdini himself, subjects Bruce to increasingly elaborate death traps. Buried alive in a coffin filled with sand, suspended upside down in a straitjacket above a tank of hungry sharks, chained to the bottom of a flooding chamber, Bruce learns to maintain clarity of thought, even when facing seemingly certain death. Fear is the mind killer, Zatara explains as Bruce successfully escapes from a sealed box that has been thrown into the ocean. Master your fear, and you master the world. But it is in the hidden training camp of the League of Shadows, deep in the mountains of Bhutan, that Bruce faces his most dangerous temptation. Raz Al Ghul, the demon's head himself, recognizes something kindred in the young American's ruthless determination. The immortal assassin offers Bruce everything he has dreamed of: the power to cleanse Gotham's corruption with surgical precision, the resources to wage war on crime itself, the brotherhood of like-minded individuals who understand that sometimes justice requires the ultimate sacrifice. You seek to become a symbol of fear to criminals, Raz says as they duel with swords on a narrow mountain ledge, the abyss yawning thousands of feet below. But why limit yourself to fear? Why not become death itself? For a moment, Bruce wavers. The League's methods are undeniably effective. They have toppled corrupt governments and eliminated crime syndicates with ruthless efficiency. But as his blade finds Ra's throat in their final sparring session, Bruce realizes that he cannot cross that final line. His parents were healers, people who built rather than destroyed. To honor their memory by becoming a killer would be the ultimate betrayal of everything they represented. I will not be death, Bruce declares, lowering his sword. I will be something far more frightening to criminals. I will be justice. Raz Al Ghul nods with something approaching respect. Then you are more dangerous than I anticipated, young detective. A man who kills is predictable. A man who refuses to kill despite having the power to do so. Such a man is truly to be feared. Bruce leaves the League of Shadows having learned their techniques but rejected their philosophy. He is trained under the deadliest assassins in the world and emerged with his moral code intact, scarred, perhaps, and certainly hardened, but still fundamentally committed to preserving life rather than taking it. His final teacher is Lady Shiva, the world's deadliest martial artist, a woman whose reputation is whispered in the darkest corners of the criminal underworld. She finds Bruce in Hong Kong, where he has been operating as a freelance detective, solving cases that the local police have given up on. Their first encounter is violent and brief. She breaks 3 of his ribs and dislocates his shoulder before he manages to land a single blow. You fight like a man trying to prove something, she observes as medics tend to his injuries. Men who fight to prove something die quickly. Men who fight because they have no choice, they become legends. Under Shiva's brutal tutelage, Bruce learns the difference between fighting and warfare. She strips away his remaining hesitations, his last traces of civilized restraint, until he becomes something that exists purely in the moment of combat. But even Shiva, who has killed more men than she can remember, recognizes that Bruce Wayne has chosen a harder path than simple murder. You could rule the world, she tells him after their final sparring session, her respect evident despite her typically emotionless demeanor. Instead, you choose to save it. I'm not certain which impulse is more admirable or more foolish. After 12 years of training, Bruce Wayne returns to Gotham City at the age of 27. But the boy who left in grief and rage has been replaced by something unprecedented. Man who combines the physical capabilities of the world's greatest warriors with the deductive brilliance of history's finest detectives, all wrapped around a moral code forged in the fires of absolute loss and tempered by years of the most rigorous training imaginable. Alfred barely recognizes him when Bruce walks through the doors of Wayne Manor. The lean teenager has become a tower of controlled muscle and surgical precision. His eyes hold depths that speak of secrets learned in hidden monasteries and lessons paid for in blood and pain. But beneath the hardened exterior, Alfred glimpses something that fills him with both hope and terror, the same burning determination that drove the 8-year-old boy kneeling in Crime Alley, now backed by skills that could reshape the world. "Welcome home, Master Bruce," Alfred says, his voice thick with emotion he cannot quite suppress. Bruce Wayne looks around the mansion where his childhood died, and for the first time in 12 years, he allows himself a small smile. "I'm not Bruce Wayne anymore, Alfred. Not entirely. Bruce Wayne is the mask I'll wear during the day. At night, I become something else, something Gotham has never seen before." The old butler studies his young master's face and sees the future written there in letters of shadow and steel. Gotham City has no idea what is coming for it, a force of nature disguised as a man, a living symbol of justice forged in the crucible of absolute loss and shaped by the finest teachers human civilization has ever produced. The boy who left Gotham in search of strength has returned as something that transcends ordinary human limitations. But the real test lies ahead, in the dark streets and twisted alleys of a city that has forgotten how to fear anything but its own corruption. Soon, very soon, Gotham will learn that the darkness which took Thomas and Martha Wayne has given birth to something infinitely more terrifying than any mere criminal. The orphan's storm has passed. In its wake stands something unprecedented, a man who has looked into the abyss and emerged not just unbroken, but transformed into the abyss's greatest enemy. Batman has been forged in fire and shadow, and he is coming home. Year 1 of Fire rises in Gotham. Gotham City spreads before Bruce Wayne like a diseased organism, its neon arteries pulsing with infected light through the October darkness. From the penthouse window of Wayne Tower, he can see the entire scope of his war stretched out below the glittering financial district, where white-collar criminals launder blood money in broad daylight. The industrial sprawl where toxic waste flows as freely as the bribes that allow it, and the festering wound of the East End, where hope goes to die in abandoned lots and needle-strewn alleyways. 25 floors below, Gotham's elite gather for yet another charity gala, their laughter and champagne toasts creating a soundtrack of oblivious decadence while the city bleeds in the streets. Bruce Wayne, heir to the largest fortune in the city, is expected to make an appearance to smile and shake hands, and write checks that will disappear into the same corrupt machinery that allows Gotham's cancer to metastasize unchecked. But the man standing at the window is no longer just Bruce Wayne. 12 years of training have forged him into something harder, more focused, infinitely more dangerous. His reflection in the glass shows a face that could grace magazine covers, aristocratic cheekbones, piercing blue eyes, the kind of effortless handsomeness that opens doors and loosens tongues. It is the perfect mask for what he has become. Alfred Pennyworth enters the penthouse office with the measured steps of a man who has learned to read his master's moods, like a seismologist interpreting tremors before an earthquake. The butler carries an evening paper whose headlines scream of another murder in Crime Alley, another family destroyed by the same casual violence that shattered Bruce's world 18 years ago. "The Morrison Gala awaits your presence, Master Bruce," Alfred says, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer he will receive. "Cancel my appearance," Bruce replies without turning from the window. "Send a check instead, a large one. Let them think I'm just another guilt-ridden rich boy trying to buy absolution." Alfred sets down the newspaper and studies the headline with the grim familiarity of a man who has watched Gotham's descent into chaos for decades. Perhaps if you were to consider working within the system, the Wayne Foundation could fund police reforms, better training programs. "The system is the problem, Alfred." Bruce finally turns from the window, and the butler suppresses a shiver at the cold calculation in his ward's eyes. "I've spent months studying GCPD files, corruption reports, Judicial proceedings. The rot goes all the way to the top. Commissioner Loeb is on the Falcone family payroll. Half the detective division takes bribes as regularly as their paychecks. The courts are a joke. Criminals buy their way out of prison before the ink dries on their conviction papers. The frustration in Bruce's voice carries the weight of 18 years of grief and rage, refined by training but never diminished. He has returned to Gotham with skills that could topple governments, knowledge that could expose criminal enterprises spanning continents, and the resources to wage war on corruption itself. But he has also returned to discover that the disease infecting his city has progressed far beyond what even his cynical expectations had prepared him for. 3 blocks away, in a cramped apartment that reeks of stale cigarettes and broken dreams, Detective James Gordon stares at the same newspaper headline with the weary recognition of a good man drowning in a sea of institutional failure. At 34, Gordon looks older, his red hair already showing premature gray at the temples, his face bearing the deep lines that come from witnessing too much human ugliness without being able to do anything meaningful about it. Gordon's partner, Detective Arnold Flass, occupies the desk across from him like a tumor in an expensive suit. Flass is everything wrong with the GCPD, made manifest corrupt, lazy, brutally efficient when it comes to extracting bribes, and utterly incompetent when it comes to actual police work. He picks his teeth with a switchblade while describing his latest shakedown of a small business owner who had the audacity to report a break-in. Guy thinks he can just call the cops without paying the protection fee. Flass chuckles, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of a man who has forgotten what it means to serve and protect. Had to educate him about how things work in our fair city. Gordon's hand tightens around his coffee mug until his knuckles go white. He has been in Gotham for 6 months, transferred from Chicago with the naive belief that he could make a difference in a city that desperately needed honest cops. Instead, he has discovered that honesty is not just unwelcome in the GCPD, it is actively dangerous. 2 weeks ago, Gordon tried to arrest a drug dealer in the Bowery. The man laughed in his face and pulled out a cell phone, dialing a number that connected him directly to Commissioner Loeb's office. Within minutes, Gordon received orders to release the dealer and forget he had ever seen him. When Gordon protested, Flass took him aside and explained the facts of life with the patient tone of a teacher instructing a particularly slow student. "You got a wife, don't you, Jim? Pretty little thing named Barbara? And she's pregnant, right? Be a real shame if something happened to them while you were out playing hero." The threat was delivered with a smile, but Gordon recognized it for what it was, a promise written in blood and backed by the full weight of Gotham's criminal infrastructure. He released the dealer and watched the man disappear into the maze of Gotham's streets, another victory for the forces of corruption. That night, as Gordon lies awake next to his sleeping wife, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly, he makes a decision that will change both their lives forever. He cannot work within a system that has been designed from the ground up to protect criminals and punish those who would dare to uphold justice. But he also cannot simply transfer to another city, cannot run away and leave Gotham to rot under the weight of its own corruption. If the system will not allow him to be an honest cop, then he will have to find another way to serve justice. Meanwhile, in the depths of Wayne Manor's cave system, Bruce Wayne stands before a vast computer array that would make government intelligence agencies weep with envy. 17 monitors display real-time feeds from security cameras throughout Gotham, police radio communications, financial transaction records, and surveillance data on key figures in the city's criminal hierarchy. The cave itself has been transformed from a natural wonder into a fortress of technology and purpose, its limestone walls now housing laboratories, workshops, and training facilities that would not look out of place in a science fiction film. But for all his preparation, for all his resources and training, Bruce faces a fundamental problem that threatens to derail his war before it can truly begin. The criminals he seeks to fight are not random thugs like Joe Chill. They are organized, protected by layers of legal and illegal infrastructure, insulated from consequences by corrupt officials and intimidated witnesses. To fight them effectively, he needs to become something that can operate outside the law while still serving justice. He needs to become a symbol. The inspiration comes, as it often does, from an unexpected source. While reviewing security footage from a warehouse district break-in, Bruce notices something that makes him freeze the playback and enhance the image. There, Clinging to the steel rafters 30 feet above the ground, hangs a colony of bats, hundreds of them, watching the criminal activity below with unblinking eyes before vanishing into the darkness as silently as smoke. Bats, creatures of the night, feared by the superstitious, capable of appearing and disappearing without warning. In many cultures, they are symbols of death and rebirth, creatures that exist in the liminal space between day and night, life and death, the seen and unseen world. Bruce Wayne smiles for the first time since returning to Gotham, but it is not a pleasant expression. It is the smile of a predator who has finally found the perfect camouflage. The first Batman costume is crude by later standards: black leather and Kevlar, utility belt loaded with smoke bombs and grappling equipment, cape designed for gliding and intimidation rather than protection. But when Bruce first dons the cowl and looks at himself in the cave's mirrors, he sees something that makes his heart race with anticipation. The man looking back at him is not Bruce Wayne, billionaire playboy. It is not even the hardened warrior forged by 12 years of training. It is something entirely new, a living shadow, a creature of the night that exists solely to hunt those who prey upon the innocent. Batman's first night on Gotham's streets is a disaster by any objective measure. The costume is uncomfortable, the cape gets caught in fire escapes, and the cowl's limited peripheral vision nearly gets him killed when a drug dealer opens fire with a shotgun. But despite the technical failures, something fundamental changes in Gotham that night. For the first time in decades, criminals find themselves looking over their shoulders, jumping at shadows, whispering about something that might be watching them from the darkness. Detective Gordon, investigating a series of assault reports from the warehouse district, begins to notice patterns that make no sense according to traditional police work. Criminals are being found beaten unconscious and zip-tied to lampposts, their weapons destroyed, and their drugs confiscated. Security cameras show nothing but shadows moving impossibly fast, and the few witnesses who are willing to talk describe a figure that sounds more like urban legend than reality. Black cape, maybe 8 feet tall, eyes that glowed red in the dark, stammers Mickey Chen, a mid-level enforcer for the Triads whose arm bears the clear imprint of a boot sole. Move like smoke, man, like he wasn't even human. Gordon files the report with growing fascination. Someone is waging a private war on Gotham's criminal element. Someone with resources, training, and a complete disregard for legal procedure. The vigilantifor that is clearly what this Batman figure must be doing, what Gordon and every honest cop in the city has dreamed of doing. Taking the fight directly to the criminals without worrying about corrupt courts or bought judges. The first meeting between Gordon and Batman occurs 3 weeks into the Dark Knight's career, on the roof of GCPD headquarters during a November rainstorm that turns Gotham's neon into impressionist smears of color. Gordon has been leaving the Bat Signal a crude spotlight with a cardboard cutout on the roof for 5 nights running, hoping to make contact with the mysterious vigilante. When Batman finally appears, materializing from the shadows like a living nightmare, Gordon's first instinct is to reach for his service weapon. But something in the figure's posture, the way he stands perfectly still despite the wind and rain, the calm confidence that radiates from him even through the costume, makes Gordon pause. "You're the one they're calling Batman," Gordon says, his voice barely audible over the storm. "I am." The voice that responds is not quite human, electronically modulated, deeper and more resonant than any normal person could produce. "And you're the only honest cop left in this city." The conversation that follows is brief but momentous. Gordon learns that Batman has been watching him, studying his cases, analyzing his arrest patterns and conviction rates. In return, Batman receives confirmation of what he has already suspected, that the corruption in the GCPD runs so deep that traditional law enforcement has become actively complicit in Gotham's decay. "I can give you information," Batman offers as lightning illuminates his cape in stark relief against the storm clouds. "Evidence that your fellow officers can't ignore or suppress. But I need your word that you'll act on it, regardless of where it leads or who it implicates." Gordon considers the offer while rain streams down his face. Accepting help from a vigilante would be career suicide if discovered. But the alternative is to continue watching Gotham rot while criminals operate with impunity. In the end, the choice is no choice at all. "What do you need?" Gordon asks. The partnership that forms that night will reshape Gotham City's future. though neither man fully understands its significance at the time. Gordon provides Batman with inside information about police operations, early warning about raids, and access to evidence that would otherwise disappear into the GCPD's corrupted chain of custody. In return, Batman supplies Gordon with intelligence that no conventional investigation could obtain: surveillance footage from impossible angles, recorded conversations between criminal bosses, financial records that expose money laundering operations spanning decades. Their first major success comes when Batman infiltrates a meeting between Commissioner Loeb and Carmine Falcone, Gotham's most powerful crime boss. The recording Batman obtains reveals not just casual corruption but active conspiracy. Loeb has been feeding information about police operations directly to the Falcone family, allowing them to stay one step ahead of any legitimate investigation. Gordon takes the evidence to the FBI, bypassing the corrupted local system entirely. Within a week, federal agents descend on Gotham like an occupying army, armed with warrants and subpoenas that Falcone's money cannot simply make disappear. Loeb is arrested in his office, dragged out in handcuffs while news cameras capture every humiliating moment. But Gotham's criminal element does not accept these defeats passively. Carmine Falcone, recognizing that the mysterious Batman poses a threat to his entire operation, puts out a contract that makes every assassin and mercenary on the East Coast salivate with greed. $10 million for Batman, dead or alive. The first attempt on Batman's life comes from Victor Zsasz, a serial killer whose body bears hundreds of scars sewn for each of his victims. Zsasz corners Batman in an abandoned subway tunnel, wielding a pair of hunting knives with the gleeful enthusiasm of a child opening presents on Christmas morning. "Gonna carve you up nice and slow, Batman?" Zsasz purrs as he circles his prey. "Gonna add you to my collection. Maybe I'll keep the cape as a trophy." The fight that follows is brutal and decisive. Batman has trained for 12 years to face exactly this kind of opponenta-skilled killer with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Zsasz's knives whistle through the air with lethal precision, but Batman's movements flow like water around stone, each dodge calculated to position himself for the inevitable counterattack. When it comes, the end is swift. Batman's grappling gun fires a line that wraps around Zsasz's ankles, yanking him off balance. A perfectly timed uppercut sends the serial killer crashing into the tunnel wall, unconscious before his body hits the ground. But as Batman zip-ties Zsasz's hands, he realizes that this is only the beginning. Falcone's bounty will draw every killer in the criminal underworld to Gotham. The message Batman leaves with Zsasz's unconscious form is simple but effective: a batarang embedded in the tunnel wall, its razor edges catching the dim light like a promise of swift justice. By morning, word has spread through Gotham's underworld that the Batman is not just real, he is untouchable. Detective Flass, already nervous about the federal investigations sweeping through the GCPD, makes the mistake of trying to intimidate Gordon's pregnant wife. He follows Barbara Gordon home from her teaching job, cornering her in the parking garage of their apartment building with the casual menace of a man who has terrorized civilians for years. "Tell your husband to back off," Flass growls, his hand resting meaningfully on his service weapon. "This Batman thing he's got going on, it's not healthy for any of us." But Barbara Gordon is not the helpless victim Flass expects. The daughter of a Chicago police captain, she has grown up around cops and learned to recognize the difference between those who serve and those who prey. When Flass reaches for her arm, she breaks his nose with a textbook right cross that would make her father proud. "Touch me again," she says with deadly calm as Flass staggers backward, blood streaming down his face, "and I'll do more than break your nose. I'll make sure every honest cop in this city knows exactly what kind of man you really are." Flass retreats, but his humiliation only fuels his rage. That night, he and 3 other corrupt officers corner Gordon in the precinct parking garage, intending to deliver the kind of beating that will send a clear message about the consequences of cooperation with vigilantes. They never get the chance. Batman drops from the darkness above like a falling shadow, his cape spreading to create the illusion of vast wings. The first officer goes down to a nerve strike that leaves him paralyzed but conscious. The second manages to draw his weapon before Batman's batarang severs the tendons in his wrist with surgical precision. Flass himself tries to run, but finds his path blocked by a figure that seems to materialize from the very air itself. "Detective Flass," Batman says, his electronically modulated voice carrying the weight of judgment itself. "You have something that belongs to me." Flass, his earlier bravado evaporating like steam, stammers out a denial. But Batman steps closer, and in the pale light of the parking garage's fluorescent fixtures, Flass can see his own terrified reflection in the Dark Knight's cowl. "Fear," Batman continues, as if Flass hasn't spoken. "You've been using it as a weapon against innocent people for years. Now you're going to learn what it feels like to be afraid." What follows is not torture in any conventional sense. Batman never lays a hand on Flass. Instead, he simply talks, his voice never rising above a conversational tone, describing in clinical detail what he knows about Flass's crimes. The bribes, the intimidation, the evidence tampering, the protection money, all of it laid out with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. But it is the personal details that break Flass's spirit. Batman knows about his gambling debts, his drinking problem, the loan sharks who are already circling like vultures. He knows about Flass's ex-wife, his estranged children, the way his mother still calls him every Sunday despite knowing what he has become. "I could destroy you tomorrow," Batman concludes, as Flass slumps against his patrol car, all fight drained from his body. "Expose every dirty deal, every crime you've committed in uniform. But that would be too quick, too easy. Instead, you're going to do something much worse. You're going to live with the knowledge that I'm watching. Always. And the moment you step out of line, the moment you threaten another innocent person, I'll be there." Flass's resignation letter appears on Commissioner Loeb's desk the next morning, though Loeb himself is no longer there to read it. The corrupt commissioner has been transferred to federal custody, pending trial on charges that will likely see him spend the rest of his life in prison. The power vacuum created by these arrests sends shock waves through Gotham's criminal hierarchy. Carmine Falcone, recognizing that his old methods of control are no longer sufficient, begins planning something unprecedented: a war, not just against Batman, but against the very idea of law and order in Gotham City. As winter settles over Gotham like a gray shroud, Batman's legend grows with each passing night. Criminals speak his name in whispers, crossing themselves when they venture into the darkness of Crime Alley or the Warehouse District. The city's honest citizens, a minority that has remained silent for decades, begin to hope for the first time since anyone can remember. But Bruce Wayne knows that his war has only just begun. In the depths of the Batcave, surrounded by evidence boards and surveillance monitors, he studies the faces of Gotham's true enemies. Falcone is just the beginning. Behind him lurk figures that make the traditional crime boss look like a street corner thug. Men and women whose madness has been refined into art, whose crimes transcend mere greed or power, hunger, and venture into realms of horror that challenge the very foundations of sanity. The Joker, the Penguin, Two-Face, the Riddler, Poison Ivy, Scarecrow. Names that will become synonymous with terror. Adversaries who will test Batman's resolve and sanity in ways that no amount of training could have prepared him for. But that is tomorrow's war. Tonight, Batman stands on a Gotham rooftop, his cape billowing in the cold wind, watching over a city that has forgotten how to believe in heroes. Below him, the lights of the GCPD headquarters burn bright, a beacon of hope in a sea of corruption, manned by the few honest officers who have survived the federal purge. Detective Gordon's silhouette appears in the window of the Major Crimes Unit, bent over a case file that will keep him working until dawn. The partnership between the honest cop and the vigilante has already changed Gotham in ways that will echo through the years to come, creating a foundation upon which justice can finally take root in ground that has been poisoned by decades of decay. Fire has risen in Gotham City, not the destructive blaze of anarchy that its criminals have always threatened, but the controlled burn of justice, clearing away the dead wood of corruption to make room for something new and clean to grow. Batman's first year is ending, but his legend has only just begun. Robin takes wing. Dick Grayson. Early partnerships. The Haley's Circus tent rises against Gotham's skyline like a cathedral of dreams, its red and white stripes snapping in the October wind while calliope music drifts across the fairgrounds like auditory cotton candy. For 3 nights, The traveling circus has transformed Robinson Park into a pocket of wonder in a city that has forgotten how to believe in magic. Families emerge from Gotham's safer neighborhoods to witness death-defying acts and impossible feats, seeking temporary escape from the urban decay that presses against their windows like a living thing. Bruce Wayne sits in the VIP section, his public persona perfectly calibrated to suggest bored wealth rather than the intense focus that drives his every waking moment. To the socialites surrounding him, he appears to be just another millionaire fulfilling social obligations, his attention seemingly divided between the performers and the blonde socialite who hangs on his arm like expensive jewelry. But beneath the carefully constructed facade, Batman studies every detail of the circus with the analytical precision of a predator cataloging potential threats. The flying Graysons command the center ring with an artistry that transcends mere acrobatics. John and Mary Grayson move through the air 30 feet above the crowd with a fluid grace that seems to mock gravity itself, their bodies executing triple somersaults and death-defying catches with the casual ease of people walking down a street. But it is their 9-year-old son Dick who captures Bruce's attention with an intensity that surprises him. The boy possesses something that goes beyond mere physical skill, joy and movement that radiates from every gesture, a pure delight in the impossible-made routine. As Dick launches himself from the trapeze platform with a laugh of pure exhilaration, Bruce sees something that he recognizes from his own distant past, a child who has never known real fear, who trusts completely in the safety net of family love that surrounds him. The realization hits Bruce with unexpected force. Dick Grayson, flying through the air with absolute confidence in his parents' ability to catch him, is exactly what Bruce Wayne had been before Crime Alley stole his innocence and replaced it with the cold determination that now drives Batman's crusade. Alfred notices his master's focused attention on the acrobatic family and files the observation away with the careful precision of a man who has learned to read Bruce Wayne's moods like a seismologist interpreting tremors. The butler has watched Bruce study criminal organizations with less intensity than he now brings to observing a family of circus performers. "Remarkable athletes," Alfred murmurs during intermission, his comment carefully neutral but loaded with unspoken questions. "Yes," Bruce replies, his voice carrying undertones that Alfred cannot quite interpret. "They are." But Batman's trained paranoia has already detected the shadows gathering around the circus's bright lights. Tony Zuko, a mid-level enforcer for the Maroni crime family, has been pressuring Haley's circus for protection money with the casual brutality that defines Gotham's criminal ecosystem. The circus owner, an honest man trying to provide clean entertainment in a dirty city, has refused to pie a decision that Batman knows will have deadly consequences. The sabotage, when it comes, is as brutal as it is predictable. During the Graysons' final act complex, aerial routine that has never been performed with safety, nets the ropes securing their equipment give way with a sound like snapping bones. John and Mary Grayson plummet 30 feet to the sawdust floor below, their bodies hitting with sickening impact that silences the crowd's gasps of delight and replaces them with screams of horror. Dick Grayson, who had been preparing for his own entrance onto the trapeze platform, watches his parents die with the same paralyzed shock that Bruce Wayne experienced 18 years ago in Crime Alley. The boy's face cycles through disbelief, denial, and finally a howl of anguish that seems to tear itself from his soul with primal force. Bruce Wayne moves without conscious thought, his billionaire playboy persona forgotten as he vaults the barrier separating the VIP section from the main floor. He reaches Dick's side before the EMTs, before the police, before anyone else can intrude on the boy's private apocalypse. When he kneels beside the sobbing child, Bruce sees his own reflection in Dick's eyes, the same devastating loss, the same fundamental shattering of everything that had seemed safe and permanent. "I know," Bruce whispers, his voice carrying weight that no 9-year-old should be able to understand but that Dick somehow recognizes instantly. "I know exactly how it feels." The investigation that follows reveals what Batman has already suspected: Tony Zuko's threats were not empty bluster. The ropes had been cut with surgical precision, weakened just enough to fail under stress while appearing intact during safety inspections. It was murder disguised as accident, terrorism directed at anyone who dared to resist Gotham's criminal taxation. But Detective Gordon's attempts to build a case against Zuko collapse under the weight of Gotham's corrupted legal system. Witnesses refuse to testify. Evidence disappears from lockup, and Zuko himself produces an alibi backed by a dozen mob lawyers and twice as many terrified accomplices. Within a week, the man who murdered Dick Grayson's parents walks free, protected by the same system that allowed Joe Chill to escape justice 18 years earlier. Dick Grayson, now a ward of the state system, faces a future of foster homes and institutional care that will grind away his spirit as efficiently as Gotham's streets have destroyed so many other children. Bruce Wayne, watching the boys process through the bureaucratic machinery with growing fury, makes a decision that will change both their lives forever. The adoption proceedings move with unusual speed, aided by Wayne family lawyers who have perfected the art of navigating Gotham's corrupted courts. Within a month, Dick Grayson becomes Dick Wayne, trading the uncertain future of state care for the vast emptiness of Wayne Manor and the enigmatic guardianship of a billionaire who still feels like a stranger. The boy's grief manifests in ways that Alfred recognizes with painful familiarity. Dick withdraws into himself, his natural exuberance replaced by a hollow-eyed silence that reminds the butler of Bruce's own transformation after his parents' murder. The child barely eats, sleeps fitfully when exhaustion finally claims him, and spends his days staring out the manor's windows at grounds that seem to stretch into infinity. But Bruce Wayne has learned lessons in the years since his own tragedy, wisdom paid for in blood and failure across a dozen countries and twice as many teachers. Where Alfred had been forced to watch Bruce's descent into obsessive purpose with helpless concern, Bruce approaches Dick's healing with the calculated precision of a surgeon repairing damaged tissue. The first breakthrough comes when Bruce finds Dick attempting to practice his acrobatic routines in the manor's ballroom, his movements clumsy and uncertain, without the familiar equipment of his circus life. The boy's frustration at his diminished capabilities finally breaks through his emotional numbness, tears streaming down his face as he fails to execute even basic moves that had once been as natural as breathing. The timing's all wrong. Dick sobs, his voice thick with grief and anger. I can't feel where I am in the air anymore. It's like part of me died with them. Bruce recognizes the metaphor with painful clarity. He had felt the same disconnection from his own life after Crime Alley, the sense that some essential part of himself had been buried with his parents and could never be recovered. But Bruce has also learned that such losses, while permanent, need not be crippling. Would you like me to build you a proper practice space? Bruce asks, his tone carefully casual. Something closer to what you're used to? The gymnasium that Bruce constructs in Wayne Manor's East Wing would not look out of place in an Olympic training facility. Regulation trampolines, parallel bars, rings, and a full trapeze setup suspended from reinforced steel beams capable of supporting an aircraft. But more importantly, Bruce himself begins training alongside Dick, his own movements awkward and unpracticed as he attempts to master skills that the boy has been perfecting since before he could walk. You're terrible at this, Dick observes after watching Bruce fail to execute a simple forward flip for the 20th time. It is the first time the boy has smiled since his parents' death, and the expression transforms his face from a mask of grief into something that reminds Bruce why he had been so captivated by the Flying Grayson's performance. Completely hopeless, Bruce agrees, deliberately tangling himself in the rope rigging with theatrical clumsiness. Perhaps you could show me the proper technique? What follows is a gradual reversal of their relationship. Dick, eager to share his expertise and hungry for connection with someone who seems genuinely interested in his abilities, begins teaching Bruce the fundamentals of acrobatics. The lessons provide structure to their days and purpose to their interaction, creating bonds that transcend mere legal guardianship. But Bruce is building towards something more than simple healing. As Dick's confidence returns and his natural athleticism reasserts itself, Bruce begins introducing subtle variations to their training routine. Combat applications disguised as acrobatic challenges. Stealth exercises presented as games of hide-and-seek through the manor's vast halls. Weapons training masked as historical education in the display of medieval armor and swords. Dick possesses instincts that amaze even Bruce's trained eye. The boy's spatial awareness, honed by years of aerial performance, allows him to navigate three-dimensional environments with a fluidity that would take most people years to develop. His timing, perfected through countless hours of coordinating with his parents' movements, enables him to anticipate and react to attacks with almost supernatural precision. More importantly, Dick demonstrates a moral clarity that reminds Bruce of what he himself had possessed before 12 years of training under history's deadliest killers had forced him to compromise with darkness. The boy sees the world in terms of right and wrong with a purity that cuts through complexity like a blade through silk. The revelation of Bruce's secret identity comes 6 months after Dick's adoption, in the depths of the Batcave where the boy has discovered his guardian's true nature through a combination of deductive reasoning and simple accident. Dick's response surprises Bruce, with its lack of surprises. If the boy had suspected all along that his mysterious benefactor harbored secrets that matched his own losses. "You're going after the man who killed my parents," Dick states rather than asks, his voice carrying a certainty that brooks no contradiction. "Yes," Bruce replies simply, "but not for revenge, for justice. There's a difference." "Teach me," Dick says, his young face set with determination that reminds Bruce painfully of his own childhood vow in Crime Alley. "Teach me to help." The discussion that follows stretches through the night and touches on questions of morality, justice, and the responsibilities that come with power. Bruce explains his rules: no killing, minimal violence when possible, protection of innocence above all else, and Dick listens with the focused attention of a student preparing for the most important examination of his life. But it is Alfred who raises the most fundamental objection to the plan taking shape between guardian and ward. "Master Bruce," the butler says during a private conversation in the manor's library, "with all due respect, you cannot seriously be considering involving a child in your campaign against Gotham's criminal element." "Dick isn't just any child, Alfred," Bruce replies, though his tone suggests he has been wrestling with the same doubts. "He has skills that most adults could never develop. More importantly, he needs this. He needs to believe that justice is possible, that his parents' deaths will have meaning." Alfred's response carries the weight of a man who has watched one child transform into something that straddles the line between hero and obsession. And what if the meaning he finds leads him down the same dark path that claimed your childhood? The question hangs between them like a challenge, forcing Bruce to confront the possibility that his desire to help Dick heal might instead damn the boy to the same isolation and moral complexity that defines Batman's existence. But as Bruce watches Dick through the library's windows, the boy practicing combat moves in the garden with a joy that transforms violence into art, realizes that the choice may no longer be his to make. Dick Grayson has already chosen his path. The only question is whether Bruce Wayne will help him walk it safely, or abandon him to find his own way through the darkness that surrounds anyone who dares to fight injustice in Gotham City. The creation of the Robin identity comes from Dick himself, a fusion of his own aerial abilities with the medieval heraldry that fills Wayne Manor's halls. The costumed, green, and yellow colors that seem to capture the circus's bright optimism, while providing practical protection, marks the birth of something unprecedented in Batman's war on crime. Robin's first night in the field comes 3 months later, when Batman finally tracks Tony Zucco to a warehouse meeting where the enforcer is planning to expand his protection racket to other traveling shows. Dick moves through the darkness above the criminals like a phantom made of light, his acrobatic skills allowing him to reach positions that even Batman's grappling equipment cannot access. The boy's first real combat encounter lasts exactly 37 seconds. Zucco, seeing what appears to be a child dropping from the rafters like an avenging angel, makes the mistake of underestimating his opponent. Dick's movements flow like water around the older man's clumsy attempts at violence, each dodge positioning him for strikes that target nerve clusters and pressure points with surgical precision. When Zucco finally collapses, paralyzed but conscious, he finds himself staring up at a child whose eyes hold depths that no 9-year-old should possess. "You killed my parents," Dick says, his voice carrying none of the rage that Zucco expects. Instead, there is only a calm certainty that somehow proves far more terrifying than any threat. "Now you're going to prison for a very long time." The evidence that Batman and Robin leave with Zucco's unconscious form: financial records, recorded conversations, photographic proof of his crime sys, comprehensive enough to satisfy even Gotham's corrupted court system. Federal prosecutors, still riding high from their successful campaign against Commissioner Loeb, eagerly accept the case that finally brings Tony Zucco to justice. But more importantly, Dick Grayson finds the closure that had eluded him since that terrible night in the circus tent. Standing over the man who murdered his parents, he experiences not the satisfaction of revenge but something far more precious: the knowledge that justice is possible, that evil can be defeated by those willing to fight for what is right. The partnership between Batman and Robin transforms both men in ways that neither anticipated. Bruce, who had spent 18 years as a solitary figure driven by personal demons, discovers the power of hope embodied in a child who refuses to let tragedy destroy his fundamental optimism. Dick, who might have grown into bitterness and despair, instead learns to channel his pain into purpose that transcends mere personal satisfaction. Together, they represent something new in Gotham's long-nighted dynamic that balances Batman's methodical darkness with Robin's acrobatic light, creating a symbol that speaks to the city's forgotten capacity for renewal and redemption. The dynamic duo's early victories against Two-Face's coin-flipping madness and the Penguin's sophisticated criminal empire established them as a force that criminals learn to fear and honest citizens dare to hope might actually change their city's fundamental nature. But perhaps most importantly, Robin's presence begins to heal something in Batman that even 12 years of the most rigorous training could not touch. In teaching Dick to be a hero, Bruce rediscovers the part of himself that believes heroism is possible. In protecting Robin from the worst aspects of their war, Batman remembers that there are still innocent things in the world worth preserving. The boy who lost everything in a circus tent has become the key to ensuring that the man who lost everything in Crime Alley does not lose himself completely to the darkness he fights. Robin takes wing in Gotham's night sky, and for the first time since Thomas and Martha Wayne's murder, the future holds promise as well as purpose. Enter the Clown Prince, Birth of the Joker. The Ace chemical processing plant squats on the banks of the Gotham River like a malignant tumor, its smokestacks belching toxic clouds into the already poisoned sky, while waste pipes discharge rainbow-colored effluent directly into waters that have not run clean in living memory. Built in the 1940s, with the kind of environmental carelessness that characterized Gotham's industrial boom, the facility represents everything wrong with the city's approach to progress: profit extracted at any cost, consequences externalized onto the poor and powerless who lack the resources to escape the fallout. Tonight, the plant serves as the setting for an encounter that will reshape Batman's understanding of evil itself, transforming his war from a comprehensible struggle against criminal greed into something far more complex and infinitely more dangerous. The man who will become the Joker arrives at Ace Chemical as part of the Red Hood Gang, a group of small-time crooks whose matching crimson helmets have become a symbol of Gotham's rising criminal audacity. But this particular Red Hood is different from his predecessors. Where previous gang members were motivated by simple greed or the desperate hunger of those with nothing left to lose, the man behind tonight's mask carries himself with the careful precision of someone who understands that he is crossing a line from which there can be no return. His real name will die in the chemical vats below, along with any hope of redemption or normal human connection. The Red Hood Gang has been escalating their crimes for months, progressing from simple robbery to acts of terrorism that seem designed more to spread fear than to generate profit. Their latest scheme, theft of $1 million in cash from Ace Chemical's company vault, represents the kind of audacious criminal enterprise that demands Batman's personal attention. But as Batman and Robin approach the facility through Gotham's toxic fog, neither realizes that they are walking into a confrontation that will define the rest of their lives. The dynamic duo moves with practiced efficiency through the plant's maze of pipes and catwalks, their black silhouettes flowing like shadows through industrial equipment that hums and clanks with the rhythm of barely controlled chemical processes. Robin's youthful enthusiasm radiates through his movements as he swings between support beams with gymnastic precision, his red and green costume a splash of color against the facility's oppressive gray monotony. At 12 years old, Dick Grayson has been fighting crime for 2 years, long enough to develop confidence in his abilities, but not yet long enough to understand that some victories come at prices that cannot be calculated in advance. 3 guards down, vault access secured. Robin reports through his communicator, his voice carrying the pride of a job well done. These Red Hood guys aren't nearly as tough as their reputation suggests. Batman, perched on a catwalk 30 feet above the main floor, feels the familiar weight of prescient unease that has kept him alive through countless dangerous encounters. Something about tonight feels different, not wrong. Exactly, but charged with significance that extends beyond a simple robbery in progress. The Red Hood leader moves with too much purpose, displays too much familiarity with the plant's layout, demonstrates too much tactical awareness for a common criminal. "Stay sharp, Robin," Batman murmurs into his communicator. "This doesn't feel like their usual pattern." The confrontation, when it comes, erupts with sudden violence in the facility's main processing chamber. Batman drops from the shadows above as the Red Hood leader attempts to crack the vault's combination, his cape spreading to create the illusion of vast wings. The criminal spins with reflexes that speak of military training, a modified pistol appearing in his hand with the fluid motion of someone who has practiced the draw countless thousands of times. "Batman," the Red Hood says, his voice electronically modulated by the helmet's built-in voice changer. "I was wondering when you'd show up. You're even more impressive in person than the rumors suggest." There is something unsettling about the Red Hood's tone, not the desperate bravado of most criminals when cornered, but a kind of delighted anticipation that suggests he has been looking forward to this encounter. He fires 3 shots in rapid succession, each bullet precisely placed to force Batman into a specific defensive position, herding the Dark Knight toward the chamber's center, like a choreographer directing a dance partner. Batman's response flows with the practiced efficiency of 12 years training under the world's deadliest fighters. He weaves between the gunshots with movements that seem to violate physics, each dodge calculated to close the distance between himself and his target. But the Red Hood demonstrates combat skills that surprise even Batman's experienced eye, moving with a fluidity that speaks of training by the same caliber of instructors who shaped the Dark Knight himself. "You fight like someone I used to know," Batman observes as their battle carries them across catwalks and through forests of industrial equipment. "Military Special Forces? League of Shadows?" "Something like that," the Red Hood replies, deflecting Batman's grappling gun with a move that would have impressed Lady Shiva herself. "Let's just say we've both received excellent educations in the art of violence." But it is the Red Hood's philosophy, expressed through casual conversation during their deadly ballet, that truly disturbs Batman. The criminal speaks of chaos as a cleansing force, of civilization as a thin veneer over humanity's fundamental savagery, of order as a collective delusion that must be shattered to reveal the truth underneath. "You think you're fighting for justice," the Red Hood continues as he leads Batman deeper into the plant's labyrinthine interior. "But justice is just another word for the status quo. The real truth is that everyone is one bad day away from becoming me. One moment of absolute loss. One instant where the universe reveals its fundamental indifference to human suffering, and all your precious morality becomes nothing more than a fairy tale you tell yourself to sleep at night." The words strike Batman with unexpected force because they echo his own darkest thoughts, the doubts that surface during his bleakest moments in the Batcave, when Gotham's corruption seems overwhelming and his mission feels futile. But where Batman channeled his trauma into a rigid moral code that seeks to impose order on chaos, the Red Hood appears to have embraced chaos as the only honest response to an inherently meaningless universe. Robin's intervention comes at the crucial moment when Batman finds himself backed against the railing of a catwalk overlooking the facility's main chemical vat. The boy Wonder swings down from above with acrobatic precision, his feet connecting with the Red Hood's chest in a perfectly executed dropkick that should have ended the fight immediately. Instead, the Red Hood absorbs the impact with inhuman resilience, catching Robin's ankles and using the boy's momentum to pivot into a throw that sends the young hero sprawling across the catwalk's metal grating. For a moment, Dick Grayson lies stunned, his costume torn and blood trickling from a cut above his left eye. "Now this is interesting," the Red Hood muses, his helmet tilting as he studies Robin with the clinical interest of a scientist examining a particularly fascinating specimen. Batman and Boy Wonder, the Dark Avenger and his bright-eyed apprentice. "Tell me, kid, have you ever killed anyone?" Robin's response carries the moral certainty that has defined his partnership with Batman. "We don't kill, ever. That's what separates us from criminals like you." The Red Hood's laughter, distorted by his helmet's voice modulator, echoes through the chemical plant like the sound of breaking glass. "Separates you? Oh, my dear boy. You have no idea how thin that line really is, how easy it would be to cross. how inevitable it is that one day you'll find yourself standing where I am, realizing that all your pretty ideals were just elaborate self-deception. But it is Batman's response that transforms the encounter from mere philosophical debate into something approaching religious war. The Dark Knight rises from where the Red Hood's attacks had driven him, his cape billowing in the chemical plant's toxic drafts, his voice carrying absolute conviction that cuts through doubt like a blade through silk. "You're wrong," Batman states with finality that brooks no argument. "The line between justice and murder isn't thin, it's absolute. Cross it once, and you become everything you claim to fight against." Some of us understand that distinction. Others choose to embrace the darkness and call it enlightenment. The Red Hood's helmet turns toward Batman with mechanical precision, and somehow his silence conveys more menace than any threat could have achieved. When he speaks again, his voice carries a promise that seems to resonate from the chemical vats themselves. "We'll see about that, Batman. We'll see how absolute your precious line remains when I strip away everything you care about, everyone you're trying to protect. We'll see how much of a hero you are when the universe finally reveals its true face." The fight's conclusion comes with shocking suddenness. Batman, recognizing that conventional combat techniques will not subdue an opponent with the Red Hood's evident training and resources, employs a psychological warfare technique learned from his studies under Dr. Hugo Strange in Vienna. He removes a batarang designed to emit specific light frequencies that trigger disorientation in most human nervous systems. But the Red Hood's reflexive dodge carries him backward into the facility's safety railing with more force than he apparently intended. The metal barrier, weakened by years of chemical exposure and minimal maintenance, gives way with a sound like breaking bones. For a moment that seems to stretch into eternity, the Red Hood hangs suspended in midair, his arms windmilling frantically as gravity claims him. Batman lunges forward, his hand reaching desperately for the falling criminal, but his fingers close on empty air as the Red Hood plummets toward the chemical vat 30 feet below. The splash that follows sends waves of bubbling, luminescent liquid across the chamber floor, and for several minutes, Batman and Robin watch the surface anxiously for any sign of their adversary. When a figure finally emerges from the chemical soup, it bears only passing resemblance to the man who fell. The Red Hood's helmet has been dissolved by the industrial acids, revealing a face that has been bleached bone-white by the same chemicals. Hair that was presumably brown or black now blazes green as emerald fire. But it is the mouth that provides the final, horrifying detail stretched into a permanent rictus grin that speaks of nerve damage and psychological fracture in equal measure. The creature that pulls itself onto the chamber's loading dock no longer moves with the Red Hood's controlled precision. Instead, its gestures have acquired a jerky, puppet-like quality that suggests fundamental damage to both nervous system and psyche. When it speaks, the voice that emerges carries none of the philosophical certainty that had characterized the Red Hood's earlier statements. "Oh my," the thing that will become the Joker says, studying its reflection in a pool of spilled chemicals. "Oh my, oh my, oh my, this is unexpected. And rather liberating, actually. I feel like I've been reborn, like I've finally become what I was always meant to be." Batman and Robin watch in growing horror as the creature begins to laugh, not the bitter chuckle of the Red Hood, but something that sounds like breaking glass and screaming children, and the last sound anyone hears before dying alone in the dark. The laughter builds in volume and intensity until it fills the entire chemical plant, echoing off industrial surfaces and seeming to take on a life of its own. "Thank you," the Joker says to Batman as his laughter finally subsides into giggles that somehow prove even more disturbing. "Thank you for showing me the truth. You were absolutely right, there is a line between justice and murder. But you missed the most important part of the equation." The Joker's grin widens impossibly, revealing teeth that have been stained yellow-green by the chemical bath. The line isn't there to keep people like me from becoming monsters. It's there to keep people like you from realizing that you already are. With that pronouncement, the Joker produces a small, explosive device from his dissolved costume and triggers it with theatrical flourish. The resulting explosion fills the chamber with smoke and chemical vapor, providing cover for his escape. When the air finally clears, Batman and Robin find themselves alone in the facility, surrounded by evidence of a transformation that neither fully comprehends. But they do not remain alone for long. The Joker's first crime as Gotham's clown prince of crime occurs exactly 72 hours later, announcing his transformation to Gotham with the kind of theatrical brutality that will become his signature. The Gotham Museum of Natural History becomes his stage, its hall of human evolution, the perfect setting for a philosophical statement written in blood and madness. The security guards find the exhibits rearranged in grotesque parody of their educational purpose. Caveman displays have been positioned to suggest acts of violence and cannibalism. The progression from ape to human has been reversed, with modern Homo sapiens figures placed at the beginning of the timeline and Neanderthals at the end, suggesting devolution rather than progress. And throughout the hall, chemical residue creates smiley faces on every surface: walls, floors, display cases, even the ceiling. But it is the message left scrawled across the main display case that announces the Joker's true purpose to Gotham. Evolution is a lie. We're all just animals pretending to be civilized. I'm going to prove it to everyone, one smile at a time. J. The letter J has been dotted with a small skull and crossbones, rendered in what forensic analysis will later confirm to be human blood. Detective Gordon arrives at the scene with the weary recognition of a man who has seen Gotham's capacity for horror expand beyond all reasonable boundaries. The federal cleanup of the GCPD has left him as acting commissioner, a position that carries all the responsibility of leadership with none of its traditional authority. Half his officers are under investigation. The other half don't trust him to keep them safe from either criminals or their own corrupted colleagues. Any witnesses? Gordon asks the responding officers, though he already knows the answer from their expressions. 3 guards, all unconscious when we arrived, Officer Montoya reports, her voice carrying the flat affect of someone trying not to think too deeply about what she's witnessing. Paramedics say they were exposed to some kind of chemical agent. They're alive, but they won't stop laughing. Gordon follows Montoya to the museum's security office, where the 3 guards sit strapped to gurneys while EMTs monitor their vital signs. The men's faces are frozen in expressions of manic joy, their mouths stretched impossibly wide, their eyes streaming tears that might be from laughter or agony or some combination of both. Every few seconds, fresh peals of hysterical giggling escape their lips, building to crescendos that seem to threaten their sanity. How long have they been like this? Gordon asks the senior paramedic. Since we found them 4 hours ago, comes the reply. Whatever they were exposed to, it's unlike anything in our databases. The chemical signature doesn't match any known compound, but the effects. The paramedic trails off, studying readouts that clearly disturb him. What effects? Severe neurological disruption, but not in patterns we recognize. It's like their brain chemistry has been rewired to produce euphoria regardless of external stimuli. They're experiencing the most intense joy possible, while simultaneously being aware that something terrible has happened to them. It's sophisticated torture, disguised as bliss. Gordon turns away from the guards' continued laughter, feeling something cold settle in his stomach. Gotham's criminals have always been brutal, but this represents something qualitatively different, not just violence for profit or intimidation, but suffering elevated to art form. Someone is using human beings as canvases for philosophical statements about the nature of sanity itself. Batman arrives at the museum after Gordon's call, his cape billowing in the night wind as he drops from a grappling line onto the building's neoclassical facade. Robin follows with acrobatic precision, his red and green costume a splash of color against the museum's white marble columns. Together, they represent Gotham's best hope against the darkness that seems to be growing stronger with each passing night. Inside the Hall of Human Evolution, Batman studies the Joker's handiwork with the analytical intensity he brings to every crime scene. But this feels different from the typical criminal enterprises he has learned to decode, not random violence or carefully planned heists, but something that seems designed specifically to challenge his understanding of human nature itself. He's trying to tell us something, Robin observes, his young mind cutting through the grotesque imagery to identify underlying patterns. All this rearrangement, the chemical signatures, the guard's condition, it's not random. It's a message. What kind of message? Batman asks, though he suspects he already knows the answer. That civilization is pretense, Robin replies with the clarity that sometimes comes from innocence not yet corrupted by adult cynicism. That underneath our rules and laws and moral codes, We're all just animals waiting for the right trigger to revert to savagery. Batman nods grimly. The Joker's first crime scene reveals a mind that has not simply snapped under pressure but is instead crystallized around a philosophy of chaos that challenges every assumption upon which Batman's mission rests. If the Joker is corrective, human civilization is indeed nothing more than elaborate self-deception, then Batman's war on crime becomes not just futile but actively harmful, preventing people from accepting their true nature. But Batman rejects that premise with every fiber of his being. Thomas and Martha Wayne had dedicated their lives to healing and helping others, choosing service over selfishness, even in a city that punished such choices with violence. Alfred continues to show loyalty and devotion despite having no obligation beyond contracted employment. Dick Grayson transformed his own trauma into purpose that helps rather than hurts others. He's wrong, Batman says with quiet conviction. Civilization isn't Pretensite's choice. Every day, people choose to help rather than harm, to build rather than destroy, to sacrifice their own immediate desires for the greater good. Those choices are real, and they matter. Then why does he believe otherwise? Robin asks. The question hangs in the air like a challenge, forcing Batman to confront possibilities he would prefer not to consider. The man who became the Joker had possessed skills and knowledge that suggested education, training, perhaps even noble intentions. What transforms someone from potential hero to active force for chaos? What breaks a mind so completely that it embraces madness as wisdom? The answer comes 3 days later, when the Joker strikes again, this time at Gotham Presbyterian Church during Sunday morning services. 200 worshippers find themselves trapped in their pews as Joker gas fills the sanctuary, their final moments spent in helpless laughter, while their families watch in horror. But it is the message the Joker leaves on the altar that provides insight into his psychological evolution. God doesn't answer prayers in Gotham. I do. Pray to me for deliverance from the joke that is your existence. J. Batman arrives too late to save the congregation, but early enough to confront the Joker himself as the madman poses for photographs beside his latest victims. The clown prince of crime has traded his dissolved Red Hood costume for purple formal wear that somehow makes his chalk-white skin and green hair appear even more unnatural. His smile has become a permanent fixture, carved into his face by chemical damage and psychological fracture in equal measure. "Batman!" the Joker exclaims with delighted enthusiasm, as if greeting an old friend rather than an enemy. Perfect timing. I was just explaining to my new congregation the fundamental joke that underlies all human existence. What joke? Batman asks, though he dreads the answer. The joke that there's any meaning to any of this. The Joker gestures broadly at the sanctuary full of dead worshippers, their faces frozen in expressions of manic joy. These people spent their entire lives believing in something greater than themselves, following rules handed down by invisible authorities, sacrificing immediate pleasure for promised rewards that will never come. And how does the universe repay their faith? The Joker produces a small vial of crystalline powder, the same substance that had incapacitated the museum guards, with the exact same ending that awaits every murderer, every saint, every hero, and every villain. Death, followed by absolutely nothing. The only rational response to such cosmic indifference is laughter. Batman moves with liquid precision, his grappling gun firing a line that should tangle the Joker's feet and bring him down like a felled tree. But the Clown Prince demonstrates reflexes that speak of the same military training Batman had detected in his Red Hood incarnation, dodging with movements that seem to flow like water around solid obstacles. The Joker tuts with mock disappointment. No violence in the house of God, Batman. That would be sacrilegious. The pursuit that follows carries them through Gotham's Gothic architecture, like a chase scene from a fever dream. The Joker moves across rooftops and through alleyways with skills that rival Batman's own, but his route seems designed more for theatrical effect than tactical advantage. He wants to be chased, wants to draw Batman deeper into a philosophical confrontation that transcends mere physical combat. They finally face each other atop the Gotham Cathedral's bell tower, the city sprawling below them like a circuit board of lights and shadows. The Joker perches on the tower's edge with the casual balance of someone who no longer fears death, his purple coattails flapping in the wind like broken wings. Tell me, Batman, the Joker calls over the night wind. What makes you think your mission has any meaning? You capture criminals. They escape or get released on technicalities. You save innocent lives. Other innocent people die while you're busy playing hero. You impose order on chaos, but chaos always returns stronger than before. What's the point? Batman's response carries the weight of every choice he has made since that night in Crime Alley. Every training session that pushed his body beyond human limits. Every criminal he has faced without compromising his moral code. The point is that we try, Batman says simply. The point is that someone has to stand against the darkness, even if we can't eliminate it completely. The point is that every life saved, every crime prevented, every moment of hope preserved in a place like Gotham, all of it matters, because we choose to make it matter. The Joker's laughter builds to crescendo that seems to shake the cathedral's stone foundations. Choose to make it matter? Oh, Batman, you beautiful fool. You've created meaning out of nothing, purpose out of chaos, hope out of despair, and you actually believe it's real. It is real, Batman insists. Your parents must have taught you that once. Someone must have shown you that love and sacrifice and dedication to something greater than yourself can transform the world, one person at a time. For a moment, something flickers across the Joker's fascinate sanity. Exactly, but a shadow of whatever humanity had existed before the chemical bath. His permanent grin seems to falter slightly, as if some buried part of his psyche recognizes the truth in Batman's words. But the moment passes like smoke in wind, and the Joker's smile returns wider than ever. My parents? He giggles with renewed mania. Oh, Batman, you assume I remember having parents. You assume I remember anything from before my rebirth in those beautiful, cleansing chemicals. The joke's on you. I'm not broken by trauma like some common criminal. I'm liberated from the burden of having a past to regret or a future to fear. The Joker produces a small explosive device, his movements suddenly urgent as police sirens wail in the distance. But don't worry, Batman. We'll have plenty of time to continue this conversation. After all, every hero needs a proper nemesis, and I've decided that you're going to be mine. Together, we'll explore the fundamental question of whether order or chaos represents humanity's true nature. The explosion that follows fills the bell tower with smoke and chemical vapor, providing cover for the Joker's escape via a hidden zip line that carries him into Gotham's maze of Gothic architecture. When the air clears, Batman finds himself alone atop the cathedral, surrounded by evidence of a confrontation that has redefined the scope of his war. But he is not entirely alone. Robin swings up from below, his young face set with determination that reminds Batman why he continues to believe in humanity's capacity for heroism despite evidence to the contrary. Did you get him? Robin asks. He got away, Batman replies. But we know who he is now, what he represents. What does he represent? Batman studies the city spread below them, its lights twinkling like stars in an inverted sky. Somewhere in that urban maze, the Joker is already planning his next atrocity, his next philosophical challenge to the assumptions that drive Batman's mission. But also somewhere in that same maze are people like Jim Gordon, like Alfred, like Dick Grayson himself. People who choose daily to build rather than destroy, to help rather than harm, to hope rather than despair. He represents the voice that whispers in everyone's ear during their darkest moments. Batman finally answers. The voice that says nothing matters, that all our struggles are meaningless, that we might as well surrender to chaos because order is just elaborate self-deception. And what do we represent? Robin asks. Batman allows himself a small smile beneath his cowl, the first genuine expression of hope he has felt since the Joker's emergence. We represent the answer to that voice. We represent the choice to keep fighting anyway, to keep building meaning out of chaos, to keep believing that what we do matters even when we can't prove it. The Joker has been born, and with him comes a new kind of warfare that will test Batman's convictions in ways that mere criminals never could. But in that same crucible of philosophical conflict, Batman's mission has been refined and strengthened, transformed from simple crime fighting into something approaching religious devotion to the idea that individual choices can reshape reality itself. The dance between order and chaos, hope and despair, meaning and madness has begun. It will continue for as long as Batman draws breath, each encounter deepening their understanding of what separates heroes from villains, sanity from madness, love from indifference. In the Joker, Batman has found not just an enemy, but a dark mirror that reflects everything he might have become if he had chosen differently in that moment of absolute loss 18 years ago. Crime Alley created Batman. Ace Chemical created the Joker. Now Gotham City becomes their chessboard, and every citizen a piece in a game whose stakes are nothing less than the soul of human civilization itself. The Clown Prince of Crime spreads his arms wide atop a distant rooftop, his laughter echoing across the city like a promise of chaos to come. But from the Cathedral Tower, Batman and Robin watch over their city with unwavering vigilance. Their presence, a promise that no matter how dark the night becomes, someone will always stand guard against the forces that would reduce hope to nothing more than an elaborate joke. The war for Gotham's soul has entered a new phase, and Batman has finally met his perfect opposite, the one adversary who challenges not just his methods but his fundamental belief that human existence has meaning worth preserving. The Joker represents entropy made manifest, chaos given form and purpose, and a twisted philosophy that seeks to drag everyone into the abyss of meaninglessness. But Batman represents something equally powerful: the human capacity to create meaning in a meaningless universe, to build hope on foundations of loss, to transform trauma into purpose that serves something greater than mere survival. The collision between these forces will define not just their own fates, but the destiny of everyone who calls Gotham home. The boy who lost everything has become the man who stands for everything. The man who lost his mind has become the avatar of nothing. Between them lies the future of a city, and perhaps the answer to humanity's most fundamental question: whether consciousness is a cosmic accident or a conscious choice to make existence matter through acts of will and love and uncompromising dedication to the idea that heroes are real because people choose to become them. Heart of Ice, Demons in the Shadows. Winter descends upon Gotham like a judgment from heaven, transforming the city's perpetual grime into something approaching beauty as snow covers the angular brutality of its architecture in pristine white. The cold brings temporary respite from the usual stench of decay and corruption, replacing it with air so crisp it seems to cut the lungs with each breath. But beneath this deceptive tranquility, darkness grows like cancer in the spaces between snowflakes, and evil prepares to reveal faces that will test Batman's understanding of justice itself. Dr. Victor Fries works alone in his laboratory deep beneath GothCorp's research facility, surrounded by experimental cryogenic equipment that hums with the patient rhythm of mechanical breathing. The laboratory's temperature hovers at exactly -40 degrees Celsius, cold enough to preserve life indefinitely, cold enough to stop time itself in its crystalline tracks. Steam rises from Fries's breath as he adjusts the controls on a suspension chamber that contains the most precious thing in his universe: his wife Nora, frozen in perfect stasis, while her rare disease remains halted at the cellular level. Nora Fries sleeps behind walls of reinforced glass, her face serene with the peace of someone who trusts completely in her husband's devotion. The rare cellular degeneration that would have killed her within months has been stopped by Victor's cryogenic process, buying them time to search for a cure that exists somewhere in the vast complexity of human genetic medicine. She appears as beautiful as the day Victor first met her, perhaps more so, transformed by the crystalline perfection of suspended animation into something that transcends mere mortality. "Soon, my love," Victor whispers to the chamber, his words forming small clouds in the frigid air. "Soon I'll have perfected the cellular regeneration process. Soon you'll wake up to a world where we can grow old together." But Victor's private devotion is about to collide with corporate greed in ways that will transform love into vengeance and scientific dedication into murderous obsession. Ferris Boyle, GothCorp's ruthlessly efficient CEO, has been monitoring Fries's work with the cold calculation of a man who sees human suffering only in terms of profit margins and quarterly reports. The cryogenic research represents millions of dollars in potential military contracts, weapons applications that could revolutionize modern warfare by literally freezing enemy forces in their tracks. Boyle enters the laboratory without knocking, his expensive suit somehow making the sterile environment seem even colder. He moves with the casual arrogance of someone who has never doubted his right to control other people's destinies, his eyes immediately focusing on the suspension chamber with the hungry attention of a predator evaluating prey. "Impressive work, Victor," Boyle says, though his tone carries none of the respect that such praise should convey. The military applications alone could make GothCorp the primary defense contractor for the next decade. Victor's response carries the dangerous quiet of a man whose patience has been tested beyond reasonable limits. "This research isn't for military applications, Mr. Boyle. It's medical research. Life-saving research. My wife." "Your wife is company property now," Boyle interrupts with casual brutality. "Just like this laboratory, this equipment, and this research. GothCorp has invested millions in your little passion project, and we expect a return on that investment. The cryogenic weapons prototype needs to be ready for military demonstration within the month." The words hit Victor like physical blows, each syllable driving home the realization that his wife's life has become nothing more than collateral damage in corporate America's endless hunger for profit. Nora's suspended animation chamber, designed as a sanctuary where love could triumph over death, has been redefined as the foundation for weapons that will bring death to countless others. "I won't let you weaponize my work," Victor says, his voice carrying the kind of quiet determination that smart men learn to fear. "And I won't let you wake Nora before I've perfected the regeneration process. Moving her now would kill her." Boyle's smile carries the warmth of Arctic wind. "That's where you're wrong, Victor. We're moving her tonight. The prototype demonstration is scheduled for next week, and we can't afford delays based on one employee's sentimental attachments. What follows happens with the inevitable momentum of Greek tragedy." Boyle's security team enters the laboratory armed with court orders and corporate attorneys, legal documents that transform Victor's life work into company assets subject to immediate seizure. They begin disconnecting Nora's suspension chamber with the casual efficiency of movers handling furniture, ignoring Victor's increasingly desperate explanations about the delicate balance required to maintain her cellular stasis. "Please," Victor begs, his scientific composure finally cracking under the weight of absolute helplessness. "You don't understand. The suspension process requires constant monitoring, precise temperature control, exact chemical balance. Move her now, and the cellular degeneration will resume. She'll be dead within hours." "Then you'd better work quickly to perfect the regeneration process," Boyle replies without looking away from his tablet computer. "Because the chamber is being moved tonight regardless of your objections." The accident that follows will be debated in court proceedings for years to come, though no amount of legal analysis can restore what is lost in the next 30 seconds. Victor, driven beyond reason by the prospect of watching his wife die, lunges toward the chamber's control panel in a desperate attempt to engage the emergency lockdown protocols. Boyle's security chief, a former military contractor with more enthusiasm than judgment, draws his weapon and fires a warning shot that strikes the laboratory's primary coolant line. Liquid nitrogen, stored under pressure at temperatures that can flash freeze human tissue in seconds, erupts from the severed pipeline like a geyser of crystalline death. Victor, caught directly in the spray while trying to shield Nora's chamber, screams once before the superheated cold steals his voice, along with most of his human features. The temperature shock alone should kill him instantly, but some combination of adrenaline, desperation, and scientific modification allows him to remain conscious while his body transforms into something that exists in the spaces between life and death. When the emergency teams finally contain the leak and clear the laboratory, they find Victor freeze slumped against his wife's chamber, his skin turned pale, blue, white, his breathing so shallow it barely registers on monitoring equipment. The man who had dedicated his life to preserving human existence through applied cold has been transformed into something that can only survive in temperatures that would kill normal human beings within minutes. But the cruelest irony comes when the medical teams examine Nora's suspension chamber. Boyle's ham-fisted extraction attempt has damaged the delicate life support systems beyond repair. Even if Victor had perfected the regeneration process, his wife can no longer be saved. The woman he fought to preserve has become a beautiful corpse, frozen in eternal sleep that will never end in waking. 3 weeks later, Batman investigates a series of bizarre murders that seem designed specifically to torment anyone who profits from human suffering. Corporate executives who have slashed employee healthcare benefits are found frozen solid in their offices, their faces locked in expressions of absolute terror. Defense contractors who sell weapons to the highest bidder, regardless of their intended targets, are discovered in their homes, transformed into ice sculptures that will never melt. Landlords who evict poor families during winter months are found in their luxury apartments, their bodies preserved at the moment of their final, desperate breath. The pattern becomes clear when Batman reviews the victims' connections to GothCorp and Ferris Bueller's business practices. Someone is waging a methodical campaign against anyone associated with corporate cruelty, using cold as both weapon and artistic statement. The killer moves through Gotham's night like winter wind, leaving behind crime scenes that speak of scientific precision married to passionate hatred. Batman encounters Mr. Freeze for the first time in the abandoned GothCorp facility, where Victor Freeze lost everything that gave his life meaning. The man who emerges from the shadows bears only passing resemblance to the scientist whose research files Batman has been studying. Victor's environmental suit, a masterpiece of cryogenic engineering, keeps his transformed body at the sub-zero temperatures necessary for survival, while providing mobility and strength that exceed normal human capabilities. "Batman," Freeze says, his voice emerging from the suit's speakers with mechanical precision that somehow conveys more emotion than most people achieve with their natural voices. "I wondered when you would come. Are you here to stop me from achieving justice?" "I'm here to stop you from committing murder," Batman replies, though something in Freeze's posture suggests this conversation will not follow the typical pattern of hero-villain confrontation. "Murder?" Freeze's helmet tilts with movements that seem to mock the concept of surprise. "I prefer to think of it as preservation. I'm preserving the final moments of people who profit from human suffering, creating permanent monuments to their cruelty." The philosophical debate that follows occurs while they circle each other through the ruined laboratory. Batman seeking advantage while Freeze demonstrates weapons that transform Batman's breath to frost and turn spilled water into treacherous sheets of ice. But unlike his encounters with common criminals, or even the Joker's chaotic madness, Batman finds himself facing an adversary whose motivations he cannot entirely condemn. "Ferris Bueller killed my wife," Freeze continues, his freeze gun creating barriers of ice that force Batman to constantly adjust his approach. Not with his own hands, but through corporate policies that treat human life as expendable in pursuit of profit. Where was justice then? Where were the courts that would hold him accountable for murder by proxy? Batman recognizes the dangerous ground that Freeze's questions reveal. How many people die each year because executives prioritize shareholder profits over employee safety? How many families are destroyed by corporate decisions that maximize efficiency by minimizing human considerations? If the legal system cannot touch such killers, what obligation do heroes have to respect legal limitations on justice? Justice and revenge aren't the same thing, Batman says, deploying smoke bombs that provide temporary concealment while he maneuvers toward Freeze's position. "Your wife wouldn't want you to become a killer in her memory." "My wife is dead because I believed in justice," Freeze roars, his voice amplified by the suit's speakers until it echoes through the facility like thunder. "I believe that dedication and hard work and love would be enough to save her. I believe that good people who follow the rules would be protected from evil people who break them. I was wrong about everything." The fight that follows tests Batman's skills against technology that seems to bend the laws of physics. Freeze's ice gun can create walls of crystalline barrier instantly, freeze Batman's grappling lines until they shatter like glass, and turn the laboratory's accumulated moisture into a skating rink that makes normal movement nearly impossible. But the environmental suit that gives Freeze his power also represents his weakness-complex machinery that requires constant power and precise calibration to maintain the delicate balance between life and death. Batman's victory comes not through superior strength or weapons, but through understanding the scientific principles that govern Freeze's existence. A carefully placed batarang severs the suit's primary power coupling, causing its internal temperature to rise just enough to threaten Freeze's survival without causing immediate death. The villain collapses to his knees, his breathing becoming labored as his body struggles to adapt to temperatures that approach normal human tolerance. "Let me die," Freeze gasps as Batman approaches with medical supplies designed to stabilize his condition. "Let me join her in whatever comes after." But Batman refuses to allow suicide by negligence. applying emergency cooling units that stabilize Freeze's condition while keeping him conscious enough for conversation. In the pale light of the laboratory's emergency illumination, Victor Freeze looks more like a victim than a villain, a man destroyed by circumstances beyond his control, transformed into something monstrous by love twisted into obsession. "She's gone, Victor," Batman says with gentleness that surprises even himself. "But you're still alive. You can still choose what to do with that life." "What life?" Freeze responds with bitter laughter. "I can't survive outside this suit. I can't touch another human being without killing them. I can't feel warmth or comfort or any of the things that make existence bearable. I'm already dead, I just haven't stopped moving yet." The conversation that follows, conducted while police sirens wail in the distance, touches on questions that Batman has been wrestling with since he began his war on crime. What separates justice from revenge? When does the pursuit of the greater good justify actions that would be condemned in ordinary circumstances? How much suffering can a human soul endure before it breaks completely? But perhaps most importantly, what obligation do heroes have to preserve the lives of villains who no longer want to live? Batman's answer comes not from philosophy, but from the practical recognition that Victor Freeze possesses knowledge that could benefit legitimate medical research. The cryogenic preservation techniques that could not save Nora might save countless others if applied to conventional medicine rather than weapons development. Freeze's scientific genius, channeled toward healing rather than vengeance, could transform his tragedy into triumph of a different kind. "Help me bring down GothCorp," Batman offers as police vehicles surround the facility. "Expose Boyle's practices through legal channels. Use your knowledge to save lives instead of taking them." Freeze considers the proposal, while paramedics work to stabilize his condition for transport to a specialized facility designed to accommodate his unique medical requirements. The man who had sought to preserve his wife in ice must now decide whether to preserve himself in purpose. "Justice through legal channels," Freeze muses, his voice carrying exhaustion that seems to emanate from his soul. The same legal channels that allowed Boyle to kill Nora with corporate immunity. "Why should I believe they'll work now?" "Because you'll have help," Batman replies. "Because you won't be fighting alone this time." But even as Freeze is taken into custody, not as a common criminal but as a victim requiring specialized medical care, Batman knows that their encounter has revealed cracks in his own moral foundation. How many other Victor Freezes exist in Gotham? People driven to extremes by systemic injustices that the legal system cannot touch. How long can Batman maintain his prohibition against killing when faced with enemies who view death as mercy compared to the lives they've been forced to endure? The questions follow Batman through the winter night as he returns to the Batcave, where Alfred waits with hot tea and the kind of quiet concern that speaks louder than words. The butler has been watching his master wrestle with increasingly complex moral dilemmas, and he recognizes the signs of someone whose certainties are being tested by the harsh realities of human suffering. "A difficult evening, Master Bruce?" Alfred inquires with the careful neutrality he employs when discussing Batman's more troubling cases. "Victor Freeze wasn't evil, Alfred," Batman replies, studying case files that spread across the cave's central computer array like evidence of a world gone mad. "He was broken, driven to extremes by circumstances that no person should have to endure. And yet he became a killer nonetheless," Alfred observes gently. "Because he had no other recourse," Batman continues, his voice carrying frustration that extends beyond any single case. "Because the system failed him so completely that violence seemed like the only option for achieving justice." Alfred sets down his tea service with the precise movements of a man buying time to choose his words carefully. "Master Bruce, if I may observe, you seem to be questioning the fundamental assumptions that drive your mission." "Maybe I should be," Batman admits with an honesty that surprises them both. "Maybe the world is more complicated than I wanted to believe when I started this crusade." But their conversation is interrupted by an alert from the cave's monitoring systems. Seismic sensors have detected movement in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath Gotham's East End, movement that follows patterns too regular to be natural, too purposeful to be accidental. Someone or something is moving through the underground passages with the disciplined precision of military forces conducting covert operations. Batman studies the sensor readings with growing alarm. The patterns suggest a substantial force, perhaps dozens of individuals moving through tunnel systems that supposedly connect to nothing more dangerous than abandoned train platforms and forgotten utility rooms. But Batman's extensive study of Gotham's underground geography reveals connections that city planners never intended: passages that lead to the financial district, to City Hall, to every major infrastructure center that keeps Gotham functioning. Batman calls over the cave's communication system, alerting his partner to assemble for what promises to be a complex investigation. Dick Grayson responds immediately, his youthful enthusiasm undiminished by 3 years of fighting crime in a city that seems determined to test the limits of human endurance. At 15, Robin has developed skills that would make most adults envious and wisdom that sometimes surprises even Batman with its depth. "What's the situation?" Robin asks as he studies the seismic data over Batman's shoulder. "Unknown forces moving through the underground tunnel system," Batman replies. "Organized, disciplined, heading toward targets that could cripple the city if compromised." But what Batman and Robin don't know what they cannot know until they descend into Gotham's forgotten depths is that they are about to encounter an enemy that will make Victor Freeze's broken humanity seem simple by comparison. Moving through the tunnels with lethal precision comes a force that represents evil distilled to its purest essence, led by a man whose name has been spoken in whispers across centuries and continents. Ra's al Ghul has come to Gotham City, and his arrival heralds a confrontation that will test not just Batman's skills but his fundamental understanding of justice, mercy, and the price that must be paid to save a world that may not deserve salvation. The League of Shadows emerges from darkness like a tide of disciplined destruction, their movements coordinated with the precision of an army that has been training for this moment across decades. Each assassin represents years of preparation, their skills honed in mountain fortresses and desert monasteries where failure means death and success means the honor of serving an immortal vision of perfect order. At their head walks Ra's al Ghul himself, the demon's head whose very presence seems to bend reality around his will. Tall and lean with the kind of ageless features that speak of knowledge beyond normal human experience, he moves through the tunnels like a man who has never doubted his right to reshape the world according to his design. His green eyes hold depths that suggest centuries of planning, patience that spans lifetimes, and an absolute conviction that his vision of justice transcends any moral consideration that ordinary mortals might raise in opposition. At last, Ra's murmurs as his forces take positions throughout Gotham's underground infrastructure. "We come to the city that represents everything wrong with human civilization. Here, we will demonstrate the cleansing power of absolute order, the beauty of a world purged of the weak and corrupt." Behind him, Talia al Ghul moves with the fluid grace of someone who has been trained from birth in the arts of death and seduction. Beautiful in ways that seem to transcend normal human features, she represents her father's perfect synthesis of deadly efficiency and aesthetic refinement. But something in her dark eyes suggests depths of thought that may not align completely with her father's vision, questions that she has learned to keep hidden beneath layers of filial loyalty and organizational discipline. "The detective will oppose us," Talia observes, using the title by which the League knows Batman. "His skills are considerable, and his moral conviction makes him dangerous in ways that ordinary enemies cannot match." Ra's al Ghul's smile carries the confidence of a man who has been planning this confrontation since before Bruce Wayne was born. "Indeed, beloved daughter, but that is precisely why we are here." The detective represents the noblest impulses of a dying civilization, the belief that individuals can triumph over systemic corruption through dedication and moral clarity. When we defeat him, we defeat humanity's last hope that heroism can succeed without the cleansing fire of total revolution. The philosophical war that is about to engulf Gotham City will make every previous conflict seem like a simple disagreement between children. Where Victor Fries represented love twisted by suffering, Ra's al Ghul represents wisdom corrupted by immortality, the dangerous clarity that comes from watching civilizations rise and fall like seasons until human individual life loses all meaning in comparison to abstract concepts of environmental and social purity. Batman and Robin descend into the tunnels unaware that they are walking into a confrontation that will force them to defend not just Gotham's citizens but the fundamental principles that make heroism possible in a universe that often seems designed to reward cruelty over compassion. The shadows beneath Gotham hold more than assassins. They contain questions that will challenge every assumption upon which Batman's mission rests. Before the night ends, both Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson will be forced to choose between the comfortable certainties that have guided their war on crime and the harder truths that come from facing enemies whose evil stems not from madness or greed but from principles as absolute as their own. Ice and shadow converge in Gotham's depths, where Mr. Freeze's broken humanity meets Ra's al Ghul's perfect inhumanity, and Batman must find a way to preserve both justice and mercy in a world that seems determined to prove that such ideals are nothing more than beautiful illusions. Nightfall, the breaking of the bat. The heat of Gotham's summer presses against Batman's cowl like a living thing, transforming the cave's cool darkness into a sweltering crucible where even the shadows seem to sweat. 3 months of relentless crime fighting have left Bruce Wayne's body showing stress fractures that 12 years of training could not entirely prevent micro-injuries that accumulate like compound interest. Fatigue that builds in muscles pushed beyond normal human endurance night after night. The city's criminals have grown more audacious, more violent, more desperate, as Batman's reputation spreads through the underworld like a contagion of fear. But tonight feels different. Tonight carries an electric tension that makes the Batcave's computer arrays hum with anticipatory energy, their screens flickering through surveillance feeds that reveal a city balanced on the edge of chaos. Commissioner Gordon's voice crackles through the communication system, with reports that pile atop each other like evidence of Gotham's accelerating descent into madness. Multiple explosions at Arkham Asylum. Gordon's voice carries exhaustion that seems to seep through the radio static. The entire facility is compromised. We're talking about a complete breakout, every maximum security patient released simultaneously. Batman's fingers fly across the computer keyboard, pulling up architectural plans for Arkham that reveal the scope of the disaster unfolding across the city. The asylum's patient roster reads like a catalog of human nightmares given form: the Joker's chaotic madness, 2. Face's binary obsessions, the Scarecrow's psychological terrorism, the Riddler's compulsive puzzle solve of them loose in a city that lacks the resources to contain even one such threat at a time. Estimated number of escaped inmates? Batman asks, though he dreads the answer. All of them, Gordon replies simply. Every cell, every ward, every isolation unit. It's like someone had access to the facility's complete security system and spent months planning the perfect storm. Robin, now 16 and possessed of the kind of confidence that comes from 3 years of surviving Gotham's worst nightmares, studies the incoming reports with analytical precision that would make his mentors proud. Dick Grayson has grown tall and lean, his acrobatic skills refined by combat experience into something approaching artistry. But beneath his professional composure, Batman detects traces of the same unease that gnaws at his own instincts. This isn't random, Robin observes, highlighting patterns in the breakout timing that suggest coordination beyond mere coincidence. Someone orchestrated this. Someone with inside knowledge of Arkham's security protocols and the resources to execute a plan this complex. Batman nods grimly. The psychological profiles he has compiled on Gotham's criminal element suggest that while most of them are capable of tremendous individual damage, few possess the organizational skills necessary for an operation of this magnitude. Someone new has entered the game, someone whose capabilities exceed anything Batman has encountered in his years of crime fighting. We'll handle them one at a time, Batman decides, though even as he speaks the words he recognizes their inadequacy. Start with the most dangerous and work our way down the list. But what Batman doesn't know, what he cannot know until it's too late to matter, is that the Arkham breakout represents only the opening move in a campaign that has been designed specifically to exploit his greatest strength and transform it into fatal weakness. Every criminal released tonight has been chosen not for their individual danger but for their collective capacity to exhaust Batman's resources through sheer volume of threats that demand immediate attention. The mastermind behind this elaborate chess game watches from the shadows of Santa Prisca, a Caribbean island nation where political instability and corporate corruption have created the perfect laboratory for testing theories about human endurance and superhuman capability. Bane, the man who broke the bat, studies surveillance footage of Batman's early encounters with the escaped inmates with the focused attention of a scientist observing laboratory subjects. Born in the hell of Peña Duro prison, and forged by a childhood spent in conditions that would break most adults, Bane represents something unprecedented in Batman's rogues galerian adversary, who combines physical capabilities that exceed human norms with intellectual brilliance that rivals the world's greatest strategic minds. The venom compound flowing through his bloodstream grants him strength that approaches the limits of biological possibility, but it is his mind that makes him truly dangerous. The detective moves efficiently. Bane observes to his lieutenant, the masked figure called Bird, who serves as his primary intelligence gatherer. But efficiency has limits when faced with unlimited demands. Each criminal he captures requires time, energy, physical exertion. He cannot maintain this pace indefinitely. Bird, studying tactical analyses that span months of preparation, nods with the kind of professional respect that one expert shows another. The psychological profiles suggest he will refuse outside assistance, even when the logical choice would be to coordinate with law enforcement or other potential allies. His need for control makes him predictable. More than predictable, Bane corrects with the quiet satisfaction of someone whose long planning is about to bear fruit. It makes him vulnerable. The detective's greatest strength is refusal to abandon innocent victims regardless of personal cost, becomes his weakness when faced with more threats than any one person can address. The first week of the Arkham crisis tests Batman's endurance in ways that even Lady Shiva's brutal training regimen had not anticipated. 72 hours of consecutive crime fighting leave him moving with the mechanical precision of someone whose body operates on autopilot, while his mind focuses on the tactical considerations necessary for survival. The Joker's rampage through the financial district requires 18 hours to contain, leaving a trail of chaos that will take months to repair. Two-Face's coin-flipping murder spree demands psychological warfare as much as physical confrontation, forcing Batman to think like a madman in order to anticipate a madman's choices. The Scarecrow's fear-toxin attacks on Gotham's water supply create citywide panic that transforms ordinary citizens into potential threats, their terror-induced hallucinations making them dangerous to themselves and others. The Riddler's elaborate puzzle traps throughout the city's infrastructure force Batman to solve increasingly complex mental challenges while his body screams for rest that never comes. Alfred watches his master's deterioration with growing alarm that he struggles to keep hidden beneath his customary professional demeanor. The butler has seen Bruce push himself beyond normal human limits countless times, but this feels different, not a sprint toward a specific goal, but a marathon with no finish line in sight. "Master Bruce," Alfred says during one of Batman's brief returns to the cave for equipment resupply, "perhaps it's time to consider requesting assistance from other law enforcement agencies. The National Guard, perhaps, or—" "No," Batman interrupts with finality that brooks no argument. "This is Gotham's problem. These are my enemies. I won't put untrained people at risk by involving them in situations they can't understand." The refusal represents more than strategic thinking. It reflects the fundamental isolation that has defined Batman's mission since its inception. Bruce Wayne learned early that trusting others with important responsibilities leads inevitably to loss and disappointment. Better to maintain control by accepting complete responsibility, even when that responsibility threatens to crush the person bearing it. Robin, increasingly concerned about his mentor's obvious exhaustion, attempts to take on more of the operational burden by handling what appear to be the less dangerous escaped inmates. At 16, Dick Grayson possesses skills that exceed most adults' capabilities, but even he cannot bridge the gap between promising potential and Batman's accumulated experience. His encounter with Victor Zsasz in the abandoned subway tunnels nearly ends in disaster, saved only by Batman's last-minute intervention that costs precious energy from reserves already pushed to their limits. "You're going to get yourself killed," Batman says with harsh urgency as he tends to Robin's injuries in the cave's medical facility. "These aren't street criminals anymore. They're psychological weapons designed to destroy anyone who tries to oppose them." "Then teach me to fight them properly?" Robin responds with the kind of youthful determination that usually warms Batman's heart, but tonight only intensifies his sense of responsibility. "I can handle more than you're letting me." But Batman recognizes that allowing Robin to face Arkham's most dangerous escapees would be tantamount to signing the boy's death warrant. Dick Grayson's courage exceeds his experience by dangerous margins, and the enemies they face have been specifically chosen for their capacity to exploit exactly those kinds of gaps between intention and capability. The pattern continues for 6 weeks, Batman pushing himself beyond sustainable limits, while Gotham's criminals spread chaos with the methodical precision of army ants devouring everything in their path. Each victory comes at increasing cost, each successful capture requiring more time and energy to achieve. Batman's movements begin to show the subtle loss of coordination that comes from cumulative exhaustion, his reaction time slowing just enough to be noticeable to someone watching carefully. Someone like Bane, who has been studying every encounter through surveillance networks that span the city like an electronic nervous system. He's almost ready, Bane observes as he reviews footage of Batman's latest confrontation with the Mad Hatter's mind control schemes. The detective's physical capabilities remain formidable, but his decision-making shows signs of stress-induced deterioration. Soon he will be vulnerable to direct assault. But Bane's final gambit requires more than simple physical confrontation, demands psychological warfare that strikes at the heart of Batman's identity. The attack, when it comes, targets not just Bruce Wayne's body but his fundamental conception of himself as Gotham's protector. The invasion of Wayne Manor occurs at dawn, when exhaustion from another sleepless night has left Batman's reflexes operating at perhaps 60% of normal capacity. Bane doesn't sneak through shadows or attempt subtle infiltration. He walks through the front door like a force of nature given human form, his massive frame moving with the kind of casual confidence that speaks of absolute physical superiority. Alfred meets him in the foyer with the kind of dignified courage that characterized his military service decades earlier. The butler holds an antique shotgun with steady hands, though both men know that conventional weapons will prove ineffective against someone whose strength approaches mythical proportions. "I'm afraid Master Wayne is not receiving visitors," Alfred says with polite firmness that somehow makes his defiance more impressive than shouted threats would have achieved. Bane studies the old soldier with something approaching respect before casually knocking the weapon from his hands and lifting him by the throat with one massive fist. "You are loyal, old man. Admirable, but ultimately pointless. Tell me where to find the detective, and I will make your death quick." "Go to hell," Alfred gasps through constricted airways, his response carrying the kind of absolute conviction that even Bane cannot help but admire. The blow that follows snaps Alfred's ribs and sends him crashing into the manor's antique furniture with bone-breaking force. The butler crumples to the marble floor unconscious, but alive Bane's gesture of respect for an opponent whose courage exceeded his capabilities. Batman arrives in the foyer to find Alfred's broken form surrounded by destroyed furniture, and Bane waiting with the patient stillness of a predator who knows his prey has nowhere to run. The man who broke the bat stands 7 feet tall and weighs perhaps 400 pounds of muscle, enhanced by venom to superhuman levels. His mask covers features that might once have been handsome but have been transformed by years of violence into something that seems carved from stone. "Detective," Bane says, his voice carrying accent traces that speak of education interrupted by brutality. "At last, we meet properly. I am Bane, and I have come to break you." The fight that follows will be analyzed by combat specialists for decades to come, though no amount of academic study can convey the primal terror of watching Batman's symbol of human capability pushed to its limit, systematically dismantled by an opponent whose abilities transcend normal biological parameters. Batman attacks with everything he has learned in 12 years of training under the world's deadliest fighters. His movements flow like water around obstacles, each strike precisely targeted to exploit anatomical vulnerabilities that would drop any normal opponent. But Bane absorbs punishment that would hospitalize a dozen men while responding with counterattacks that carry the force of industrial machinery. "You fight well, detective," Bane observes as his fist creates a crater in the foyer's marble floor, where Batman's head had been microseconds earlier. "But you fight like a man who has never faced a truly superior opponent. Your techniques are perfect for defeating normal humans. I am not normal." The realization that pure skill cannot overcome such overwhelming physical advantage forces Batman to adapt tactics he has never needed before. He employs hit-and-run attacks, using the manor's architecture to create barriers and obstacles that might slow Bane's advance. But the massive intruder moves through Wayne Manor's defenses like a tank through a paper wall, destroying priceless antiques and family heirlooms with casual indifference. "This house," Bane continues as their battle carries them through rooms filled with Bruce Wayne's childhood memories, represents everything weak about your approach to justice. Comfort. Security. The illusion that good intentions and noble birth can overcome the harsh realities of a world ruled by strength. Batman's response comes not through words but through a combination attack that employs his grappling gun, smoke bombs, and martial arts techniques designed to work in coordination. For a moment, it seems to work. Bane staggers under the assault, his massive frame showing the first signs of genuine vulnerability. But the moment passes like smoke and wind. Bane adapts to Batman's tactics with the kind of strategic thinking that would impress military academies, countering each technique with responses that seem designed specifically to neutralize Batman's advantages. More terrifyingly, he demonstrates knowledge of Batman's fighting style that speaks of months or years of careful study. "You wonder how I know your methods so well," Bane says as he catches Batman's cape and uses it to slam the Dark Knight into a wall with enough force to crack the mansion's foundation stones. "I have studied you, detective. I know your strengths, your weaknesses, your psychological limitations. I know you better than you know yourself." The fight's climax comes in Wayne Manor's library, surrounded by thousands of books that represent human civilization's accumulated wisdom and Bruce Wayne's lifelong commitment to learning as a path to justice. Here, among the knowledge that has shaped Batman's understanding of the world, Bane delivers the lesson that will reshape Batman's understanding of his own limitations. Batman, his body screaming with pain from injuries that would have killed a normal person, makes one final desperate assault that employs every technique he has learned from Lady Shiva, Henri Ducard, and a dozen other masters. His movements achieve a kind of desperate perfection. Born Batman, his body screaming with pain from injuries that would have killed a normal person, makes one final desperate assault that employs every technique he has learned from Lady Shiva, Henri Ducard, and a dozen other masters. His movements achieve a kind of desperate perfection, born from the knowledge that failure means not just his own death, but the destruction of everything he has sworn to protect. But Bane has been waiting for exactly this moment when Batman's desperation overrides his tactical judgment and forces him into the kind of direct confrontation that favors raw strength over refined technique. The massive villain catches Batman in mid-leap, his hands closing around the Dark Knight's torso with the inexorable pressure of a hydraulic vice. "You have fought bravely, detective," Bane says with something approaching genuine respect as he lifts Batman overhead like a sacrifice to some dark god. But bravery without strength is merely a beautiful way to die. What follows happens in slow motion that seems to stretch seconds into hours. Bane brings Batman down across his knee with calculated force designed not to kill instantly, but to inflict maximum damage while ensuring survival long enough for the lesson to be fully absorbed. The sound of Bruce Wayne's spine snapping echoes through Wayne Manor's library like breaking timber, followed immediately by Batman's scream of agony that seems to tear itself from his soul. The Dark Knight, symbol of human capability transcending ordinary limitations, collapses to the library floor paralyzed from the waist down. The man who had dedicated his life to ensuring that no one else would suffer as he had suffered in Crime Alley lies helpless among scattered books, his legs unresponsive to commands from a brain that cannot accept what has happened. "You see, detective," Bane continues, standing over Batman's broken form with the satisfaction of someone whose long planning has achieved perfect results. "Strength is the only truth that matters. Your parents died because they were weak. Your city suffers because its protectors are weak. You have failed because, ultimately, you too are weak." Robin arrives to find Wayne Manor transformed into a battlefield, and his mentor reduced to something that barely resembles the invincible figure who had trained him to fight crime. Dick Grayson's anguished cry carries through the mansion's halls like the sound of childhood's end, followed immediately by an attack on Bane that demonstrates courage exceeding wisdom by dangerous margins. But Robin's acrobatic skills, impressive though they are, prove inadequate against an opponent who has just defeated Batman through superior physical capability. Bane casually backhands the boy across the library, sending him crashing into a bookshelf with enough force to bury him under an avalanche of fallen volumes. "And you," Bane says, studying Robin's unconscious form with clinical interest, "represent the detective's greatest failure. He turned a child into a weapon, then failed to provide that weapon with adequate protection. The boy will live, but his faith in heroes dies today. With Wayne Manor conquered and Batman broken, Bane turns his attention to Gotham City itself. But rather than rule directly, he implements a strategy that demonstrates psychological sophistication, exceeding mere physical dominance. He cannot be Batman. His methods and philosophy oppose everything the symbol represents, but he can ensure that Batman's replacement embodies everything wrong with vigilante justice. Jean-Paul Valley, the man who becomes Azrael, emerges from obscurity like a fever dream made flesh. Product of a secret religious order that has spent centuries perfecting the art of righteous violence, Valley represents what Batman might have become if Bruce Wayne's moral code had been replaced by absolute certainty about divine mandate. Tall and lean with the kind of ascetic features that speak of monastic discipline, Valley moves through Gotham's streets with the mechanical precision of someone who has never doubted his right to judge others. But where Batman sought to minimize violence and preserve life even among his enemies, Azrael embraces brutality as a sacrament that cleanses sin through suffering. His version of justice dispenses with Batman's careful distinctions between criminals and victims, replacing nuanced moral reasoning with binary judgments that categorize everyone as either righteous or deserving of punishment. "I am the sword of justice," Azrael declares as he stalks Gotham's criminals with the kind of methodical precision that makes even hardened killers flee in terror. "I am the cleansing fire that burns away corruption and leaves only purity in its wake." The Azrael suit, a masterpiece of medieval technology updated with modern materials, transforms Valley into something that appears more angel of death than human protector. Golden armor plates provide protection, while amplifying his strength to levels that approach Bane's drug-enhanced capabilities. But it is the psychological enhancement systems built into the helmet that prove most dangerous neural interfaces that suppress doubt, empathy, and moral complexity in favor of absolute certainty about right and wrong. Under Azrael's harsh rule, Gotham's crime statistics plummet as criminals choose exile over the kind of justice that leaves survivors bearing permanent scars as reminders of their transgressions. But the city's innocent citizens also begin to fear the night, uncertain whether the figure stalking through shadows comes to protect or to judge them according to standards no normal person could hope to meet. Commissioner Gordon, now fully established as the GCPD's legitimate leader following the federal cleanup of corruption, finds himself in the impossible position of working with a vigilante whose methods make him deeply uncomfortable, while acknowledging that those same methods achieve results that conventional law enforcement cannot match. He's effective, Gordon admits during a private conversation with Detective Harvey Bullock, one of the few honest cops who survived the departmental purge. Crime is down 60% across all categories. But effectiveness isn't the only consideration when evaluating justice. Bullock, a working-class detective whose rough exterior conceals genuine devotion to protecting innocent people, voices the concerns that many in the GCPD share but few dare express openly. This Azrael character doesn't fight crime, he wages war on it. There's a difference between stopping bad guys and terrorizing them into submission. The philosophical divide represented by these different approaches to justice creates fractures throughout Gotham's power structure that extend far beyond simple law enforcement considerations. City council members find themselves defending policies they once opposed because Azrael's presence makes opposition seem tantamount to supporting criminal activity. Business leaders relocate operations to other cities rather than risk drawing attention from a protector whose definition of corruption encompasses practices that were previously considered standard business procedure. But perhaps most tragically, ordinary citizens begin to internalize Azrael's binary moral framework, reporting neighbors and co-workers for infractions that would once have been handled through social pressure or community intervention. Gotham transforms from a city under siege by criminal elements into a police state where justice has been replaced by fear-based compliance with arbitrary standards of righteousness. Meanwhile, in a private medical facility whose location remains known only to Alfred and a handful of trusted specialists, Bruce Wayne undergoes a rehabilitation process that tests his psychological resilience even more severely than Bane's physical assault had tested his bodily capabilities. The man who had defined himself through superhuman achievement finds himself reduced to relearning basic tasks that most people master in childhood. Physical therapy sessions stretch through months that feel like years. each small improvement measured against the vast distance between current capability and former excellence. Bruce's legs, supported by braces and experimental neural stimulation devices, respond to treatment with agonizing slowness that would break most people's spirits long before achieving meaningful recovery. But it is the psychological rehabilitation that proves most challenging. Dr. Chandra Kinsolving, the specialist overseeing Bruce's recovery, recognizes that her patient's injuries extend far beyond mere spinal damage into realms of identity crisis that threaten his fundamental conception of self. You've spent so many years defining yourself as Batman that you've forgotten how to be Bruce Wayne, Dr. Kinsolving observes during one of their therapy sessions. Recovery isn't just about regaining physical capability, it's about discovering who you are when you can't be the person you've always been. The question proves more complex than Bruce initially realizes. Without the mission that has driven him since childhood, without the physical capabilities that transformed him into a symbol of human potential, what remains of the person who started this journey in Crime Alley 18 years ago? The fortune that gives him resources could be used for conventional philanthropy. The intellect that made him a detective could be applied to business or academia or any number of socially beneficial pursuits. But none of those alternatives carry the immediate, visceral satisfaction of direct action against injustice. None of them provide the kind of meaning that comes from placing oneself between innocents and predators, regardless of personal cost. None of them offer redemption for the child who watched his parents die and vowed to ensure such tragedies never happen again. Alfred's presence during the rehabilitation process provides both comfort and challenge, as the loyal butler struggles to support his master's recovery while watching Gotham City transform under Azrael's harsh rule. The reports that filter back from the city describe a place that Bruce barely recognizes safer, perhaps, but also colder, more fearful, less willing to embrace the kind of hope that makes heroism possible. Perhaps, Alfred suggests during one of Bruce's darkest moments, this is an opportunity to consider whether Batman's mission has been completed. Crime is down. The corrupt officials have been removed from power, and the city's most dangerous criminals are either dead or too terrified to operate openly. But Bruce's response carries conviction that surprises even him with its intensity. Batman's mission isn't about statistics, Alfred. It's about what those statistics represent. A city where people follow the law because they're afraid isn't the same as a city where people choose to do right because they believe it matters. The distinction proves crucial as reports from Gotham reveal the true cost of Azrael's approach to justice. Crime statistics may show improvement, but human dignity measurements tell a different story. Children afraid to play in streets that were once considered safe. Families torn apart by ideological divisions over what constitutes acceptable behavior. Communities that once helped each other now reporting minor infractions to authorities whose response carries the promise of disproportionate punishment. Azrael has created order, Bruce realizes with growing clarity, but he's destroyed the social fabric that makes order meaningful. He's eliminated crime by eliminating the kind of trust and community connection that prevents crime naturally. The recognition provides motivation for recovery that pure physical rehabilitation could never achieve. Bruce Wayne must heal not just to reclaim his identity as Batman, but to save Gotham City from a cure that proves worse than the disease it was meant to address. But healing requires more than determination. It demands the kind of humility that allows someone who has always been self-sufficient to accept help from others. Dr. Kinsolving's treatment protocols incorporate techniques learned from specialists around the world, but they also require Bruce to trust others with responsibilities he has always kept for himself. Lady Shiva arrives unexpectedly during the final phases of Bruce's rehabilitation. Her presence in the medical facility both gift and challenge to someone whose pride has been systematically dismantled by months of dependency on others. The world's deadliest martial artist studies Bruce's condition with the clinical interest of someone evaluating a student's progress toward graduation. "You are ready," she announces without preamble, though Bruce remains confined to a wheelchair, and his legs still respond unreliably to conscious commands. "Ready for what?" Bruce asks, though something in Shiva's posture suggests he already knows the answer. "Ready to learn that strength comes not from never falling, but from choosing to rise again after falling." Shiva replies, ready to discover whether Bruce Wayne possesses the same courage that Batman always displayed. The training that follows makes Bruce's original preparation for the Batman identity seem like recreational exercise. Shiva pushes him beyond every limitation imposed by his injuries, forcing him to develop new fighting techniques that work around rather than through his physical constraints. More importantly, she challenges him to rediscover the purpose that drove him before he possessed the capabilities that made him legendary. What did you fight for before you became invincible? Shiva demands as Bruce struggles through exercises that would challenge healthy athletes. What motivated you when you were still just a man with a mission? The answer emerges slowly, painfully, through months of rehabilitation that strip away everything extraneous to Batman's core purpose. Bruce Wayne fights not because he can win every battle, but because some battles must be fought regardless of the odds. He stands against injustice not because he is powerful enough to guarantee victory, but because allowing injustice to triumph unopposed diminishes everyone's humanity. I fight because someone has to, Bruce realizes during a training session that leaves him exhausted but more centered than he has felt since Bane's attack. I fight because the alternative accepting that cruelty and corruption are inevitably unacceptable, regardless of my personal limitations. The realization provides foundation for a comeback that transcends mere physical recovery. Bruce Wayne returns to Gotham not as the invincible symbol he once represented, but as something more powerful, a human being who chooses heroism despite knowing it will cost him everything, again and again, for as long as he draws breath. But reclaiming the Batman identity requires more than personal healing. It demands confrontation with the Azrael, whose harsh rule has transformed Gotham into something Bruce barely recognizes. The final battle between Batman and his replacement will determine not just who wears the cowl, but what kind of justice Gotham deserves and what price its citizens are willing to pay for safety purchased through fear. Legacy and Reclamation. KNIGHTSEND. The Gotham that greets Bruce Wayne's return pulses with a different rhythm than the city he left behind in Bane's custody cleaner. Perhaps, but also quieter, more subdued, like a patient whose fever has broken but whose spirit remains diminished by the ordeal. Street corners that once buzzed with the chaotic energy of urban life now stand empty after sunset, their silence testifying to a populace that has learned to fear the night, regardless of which figure might emerge from its shadows. Bruce observes these changes from the passenger seat of a modified vehicle that accommodates his wheelchair with the kind of engineering precision that money can buy, but dignity must surrender to necessity. Alfred drives through neighborhoods that should feel familiar, but instead seem like elaborate stage sets designed to simulate the city Bruce once knew. The buildings remain the same, the street layouts unchanged, but something essential has been drained from Gotham's character, some vital spark that transforms mere urban geography into a living community. The crime statistics are remarkable, Alfred observes with the careful neutrality he employs when discussing topics that might upset his master's psychological equilibrium. Property crime down 73%, violent crime down 81%, drug-related arrests virtually eliminated across all demographic categories. But Bruce recognizes the hollowness beneath these impressive numbers, the way statistical success can mask human costs that defy quantification. Through the vehicle's windows, he studies a city where people hurry along sidewalks with downcast eyes, where children play in parks under the watchful supervision of adults whose vigilance speaks more of fear than care, where the very air seems to carry tension that makes normal social interaction feel dangerous. What about quality of life measurements? Bruce asks, though he suspects the answer will confirm his growing unease. Alfred's pause carries weight that speaks louder than words. More difficult to quantify, Master Bruce. Citizen complaint reports have decreased significantly, but social services indicate increased requests for counseling, family mediation, and conflict resolution. People seem careful. Very careful. The observation proves prophetic as their vehicle passes through the financial district, where Azrael's influence manifests in ways that extend far beyond simple crime prevention. Corporate executives walk to their offices in groups, their conversations conducted in voices too low for casual eavesdropping. Street vendors close their operations before sunset, unwilling to risk drawing attention from a protector whose definition of acceptable commerce excludes anything that might be construed as contributing to societal decay. But it is the absence of certain populations that provides the most telling evidence of Azrael's impact on Gotham's social fabric. The homeless encampments that once dotted the warehouse district have vanished not through successful social programs or economic improvement, but through systematic relocation efforts that pushed society's most vulnerable members beyond the city limits. Street artists who once decorated abandoned buildings with murals celebrating Gotham's resilient spirit have disappeared, their work painted over or destroyed as potential gang symbols requiring immediate intervention. Where are they? Bruce asks as their route carries them through areas that should teem with the kind of marginal populations that exist in every major city. Relocated, Alfred replies with distaste that he cannot quite suppress. Azrael's approach to urban renewal involves removing what he considers undesirable elements, rather than addressing the systemic issues that create homelessness and poverty. The implications strike Bruce with the force of personal revelation. Jean-Paul Valley has not solved Gotham's problem. She has hidden them, exported them, transformed them into someone else's responsibility. The statistical improvements that make his reign appear successful represent a kind of social accounting fraud that pushes costs onto communities less capable of bearing them. Bruce's first direct encounter with Azrael's methods occurs that evening, when police scanners report a disturbance in the Bowery that triggers both official and unofficial responses. From a concealed position in an alley that provides visual access to the scene, Bruce watches through high-powered binoculars as Azrael confronts three teenagers whose crime appears to consist of gathering after dark in a public space. The figure that emerges from the shadows bears only superficial resemblance to Batman. Where Bruce had always moved with fluid grace that seemed to flow around obstacles, Azrael's movements carry the mechanical precision of clockwork given human form. His golden armor catches streetlight like metallic flame, transforming him into something that appears more divine punishment than human protector. "You violate curfew," Azrael announces to the teenagers, his voice carrying electronic distortion that strips away any trace of humanity. "You gather in groups that exceed approved social parameters. You represent potential criminal conspiracy requiring immediate intervention." The teenagers, known older than 16, all clearly more frightened than defiant, attempt to explain their presence with the stammering earnestness of people who have done nothing wrong but cannot prove their innocence to satisfaction. They had been walking home from a legitimate school function when the late hour and Azrael's patrol schedule coincided in ways that transformed innocent activity into suspicious behavior. But Azrael's response demonstrates the binary thinking that has replaced Batman's nuanced approach to justice. His helmet's heads-up display categorizes the teenagers according to algorithmic assessments that weigh factors like neighborhood demographics, time of day, group composition, and behavioral indicators to produce threat ratings that guide his tactical response. Compliance is not optional. Azrael continues, as one of the teenagers attempts to show identification that would verify his legitimate presence in the area. "Submit to restraint for processing and evaluation." What follows makes Bruce's hands clench around his binoculars hard enough to stress the expensive optical equipment. Azrael employs what he calls non-lethal compliance techniques to subdue the teenagers with efficiency that would impress military instructors, but which reduces 3 children to unconscious forms that will require medical attention before they can be released to their families. The scene concludes with Azrael zip-tying the unconscious teenagers to a lamppost with a note explaining their violation of civic safety protocols, leaving them for police pickup, while he continues his patrol in search of additional threats to Gotham's newly imposed order. The entire encounter lasts less than 5 minutes, but provides Bruce with comprehensive insight into what his city has become in his absence. "This isn't justice," Bruce tells Alfred as they drive away from the scene. "This is fear management disguised as crime prevention." But understanding Azrael's flaws proves easier than correcting them. Bruce's return to active duty requires not just physical rehabilitation, but tactical adaptation to capabilities that remain significantly diminished from his pre-Bane levels. The wheelchair that has become his primary means of mobility can be equipped with sophisticated defensive systems, but it also represents vulnerability that enemies will inevitably attempt to exploit. Dr. Kinsolving's final medical evaluation provides both encouragement and sobering reality checks that force Bruce to confront the new limitations that will define his future as Batman. Nerve regeneration has restored approximately 60% of normal sensation to his legs, enough to support limited mobility with braces and assistive devices but insufficient for the kind of acrobatic activities that once characterized his crime-fighting style. You'll never again possess the physical capabilities that defined Batman's early career. Dr. Kinsolving explains with the gentle honesty that has characterized their entire therapeutic relationship. But physical capability was never the source of Batman's real power. That came from intellect, determination, and moral clarity that transcends any bodily limitation. The observation proves prescient as Bruce begins planning his confrontation with Azrael through strategies that emphasize psychological warfare over physical dominance. Jean-Paul Valley's greatest strength, his absolute certainty about right and wrong, also represents his fundamental weakness when faced with moral complexities that cannot be resolved through binary thinking. Bruce's investigation into Azrael's background reveals a man whose entire identity has been constructed around external validation from religious authorities, whose own moral certainties have never been tested by the kind of real-world complexity that defines life in places like Gotham City. Valley's conditioning makes him devastating against opponents who fit traditional criminal profiles, but potentially vulnerable to situations that require nuanced ethical reasoning. The trap Bruce sets for Azrael exploits this weakness through scenarios designed to reveal the inadequacy of rigid moral frameworks when applied to ambiguous real-world situations. Working through intermediaries who can provide physical capabilities that his own limitations preclude, Bruce orchestrates a series of incidents that force Azrael to choose between competing moral imperatives with no clear resolution. The first test involves a hostage situation where criminals have taken a group of children captive, but where the criminals themselves are desperate parents trying to secure medical treatment for their own dying child through insurance fraud that represents their only hope for saving a life. Azrael's binary thinking categorizes the situation as good versus evil, requiring him to stop the criminals regardless of their motivations or the consequences for their own child. But Bruce provides Azrael with complete information about the hostage-taker's circumstances, forcing him to confront the possibility that his intervention might prevent one injustice while enabling another. The psychological pressure of choosing between competing moral claims begins to stress Azrael's conditioning in ways that his religious training never anticipated. Justice is absolute, Azrael repeats to himself as he studies the situation from multiple angles, his helmet's computer systems unable to provide algorithmic solutions to ethical dilemmas that require human judgment rather than programmed responses. The second test escalates the moral complexity through scenarios where Azrael's harsh methods produce statistically positive results while destroying the social fabric that makes those statistics meaningful. Bruce arranges for Azrael to witness the human costs of his own success families torn apart by ideological divisions, communities that have lost the capacity for trust and mutual support, children who fear authority figures because authority has become synonymous with arbitrary punishment. "You have created order." Bruce's voice emerges from speakers hidden throughout the abandoned building where Azrael has cornered what he believes to be a gang meeting, "but you have destroyed the community that gives order meaning." Azrael spins toward the sound with reflexes enhanced by his suit's combat systems, but finds only shadows and the growing realization that he has been lured into a confrontation that will not be resolved through superior firepower or tactical advantage. "Show yourself, detective," Azrael demands, using the title by which Batman is known to those who have studied his methods. "Face judgment for your failures that necessitated my intervention." But Bruce's response comes not through direct confrontation but through continued psychological pressure that forces Azrael to confront the contradiction between his stated mission and actual results. Hidden cameras throughout the building provide real-time footage of Gotham citizens whose lives have been diminished rather than improved by Azrael's protection, not criminals or troublemakers, but ordinary people whose capacity for joy and community connection has been systematically suppressed. "Look at what you've accomplished," Bruce continues, his voice echoing from multiple directions as Azrael attempts to triangulate his position. "Look at the city you've created. Is this the justice you were trained to deliver?" The question strikes at the heart of Azrael's conditioning, challenging assumptions that have never been questioned since childhood. Jean-Paul Valley was raised to believe that righteous authority imposed from above creates conditions where human happiness becomes possible. But the evidence surrounding him suggests that happiness requires something more than safety. It requires the kind of freedom and community trust that his methods have systematically eliminated. "I have eliminated crime," Azrael responds, though his voice carries uncertainty that his armor's systems cannot quite mask. "I have created safety where none existed before." "You have created compliance," Bruce corrects from his concealed position. But compliance achieved through fear is not the same as justice achieved through conviction. "You have made Gotham's citizens afraid to commit crimes, but you have also made them afraid to live fully human lives." The final confrontation occurs in Wayne Manor's library, the same room where Bane broke Batman's spine and demonstrated the inadequacy of moral conviction when faced with overwhelming physical force. But this time, the battle will be fought with words and ideas rather than strength and technique, testing philosophical frameworks rather than combat capabilities. Bruce emerges from the shadows in his wheelchair, no longer attempting to hide his physical limitations, but also no longer allowing those limitations to define his capacity for heroism. The man facing Azrael appears vulnerable in ways that would have been unthinkable during Batman's early career, but his presence radiates authority that transcends any bodily constraint. "Jean, Paul," Bruce says simply, using Azrael's real name to establish human connection that cuts through the armor's dehumanizing interface. "It's time to remember who you were before you became what others wanted you to be." Azrael's response carries confusion that his conditioning has never prepared him to handle. The man in the wheelchair should represent weakness, requiring protection, or threat requiring elimination. But Bruce Wayne's presence suggests possibilities that binary thinking cannot accommodate strength that coexists with vulnerability, authority that operates through moral persuasion rather than physical dominance. "You are the failed detective," Azrael says, though his voice lacks the conviction that has characterized his previous pronouncements. "You represent the weakness that allowed evil to flourish in this city. I represent the attempt to build justice rather than impose it." Bruce replies with gentleness that somehow proves more unsettling than any threat could achieve. "I represent the belief that people are capable of choosing right over wrong when given the chance, rather than when forced through fear." The philosophical debate that follows strips away years of conditioning to reveal Jean-Paul Valley's fundamental humanity beneath layers of religious programming and technological enhancement. Bruce demonstrates, through patient reasoning and genuine concern for Valley's well-being, that the young man's desire to serve justice comes from the same source as Batman's own mission: the recognition that innocent people deserve protection from forces that would exploit their vulnerability. But where Bruce learned to channel that recognition through methods that preserve human dignity, even among criminals, Valley's training emphasized efficiency over humanity, results over relationships, order over the kind of organic community development that makes order sustainable without constant enforcement. "I was taught that humans are weak," Valley admits as his armor systems begin powering down in response to psychological states that the suit's designers never anticipated. "I was taught that strength must guide weakness toward righteousness, regardless of whether weakness desires such guidance." "Humans are often weak," Bruce agrees, "but they are also capable of tremendous strength when given reasons to hope rather than reasons to fear." The choice between building on that strength or exploiting that weakness defines the difference between justice and tyranny. The moment when Azrael removes his helmet marks the symbolic end of his reign over Gotham and the beginning of Bruce Wayne's return to active duty as Batman. Jean-Paul Valley, revealed as a young man whose ascetic features speak of genuine desire to serve something greater than himself, looks around Wayne Manor's library with eyes that see clearly for the first time in months. "What becomes of me now?" Valley asks with vulnerability that his armor had never been designed to accommodate. Bruce's answer reflects the wisdom gained through his own journey from vengeance to justice, from isolation to partnership, from rigid certainty to humble recognition of human complexity. "You become who you choose to become," Bruce says simply. "You learn from your mistakes and find ways to serve justice that build rather than destroy human community. You discover that being wrong about methods doesn't invalidate the desire to help others." The transition back to Batman's traditional approach to crime fighting requires months of careful adjustment, as Bruce develops new techniques that work within his physical limitations while addressing the social damage that Azrael's reign has inflicted on Gotham's civic culture. Citizens who learn to fear vigilante justice must slowly relearn trust in protective authority that operates through consent rather than dominance. Commissioner Gordon's relief at Batman's return manifests in ways that the gruff police veteran struggles to express through his customary professional demeanor. Their first meeting since Bruce's injury occurs on the GCPD rooftop, where the bat signal has been restored to its traditional role as a communication tool rather than summons to judgment. "It's good to have you back," Gordon says simply, though his eyes reveal the depth of concern he had felt during Batman's absence. The city needs someone who remembers that justice is supposed to serve people, not the other way around. Batman's response carries humility that his earlier career had never required, wisdom earned through suffering that no amount of training could have provided. "I'm not the same person who left, Commissioner. I can't do everything I used to do, and I can't promise that my methods will always succeed where others fail." "Maybe that's exactly what Gotham needs," Gordon replies. "A hero who understands his own limitations and works within them rather than trying to transcend them through force." The insight proves crucial as Bruce rebuilds his approach to crime fighting around partnership rather than dominance, cooperation rather than control, community building rather than individual heroism. The Batman who emerges from his confrontation with Azrael represents evolution rather than restoration, not a return to previous methods but development of new approaches that incorporate lessons learned through failure and recovery. Robin's role in this transformation cannot be overstated. Dick Grayson, now 18 and possessed of capabilities that exceed many adult heroes, provides physical capabilities that complement Bruce's strategic thinking while offering emotional support that keeps Batman connected to hope rather than consumed by duty. Their partnership evolves from mentor-student relationship into something approaching equality, though Bruce's experience and Dick's enthusiasm create synergies that exceed what either could achieve alone. "We're different now," Dick observes during one of their training sessions in the reconstructed Batcave. "All of us. You, me, even Gotham itself. But different doesn't mean worse." The observation encapsulates the lesson that Knightfall and its aftermath have taught everyone involved in Batman's mission. Strength does not require invulnerability. Justice does not require perfection. Heroism does not require the ability to solve every problem through individual action. Sometimes the greatest victory consists simply of continuing to fight for what is right, even when fighting becomes more difficult than it once was. Sometimes the most meaningful justice involves admitting mistakes and working to correct them rather than insisting that previous methods were beyond improvement. Bruce Wayne returns to his war on crime changed by his encounter with defeat, but not diminished by it. The Batman who emerges from Knightfall carries scars that will never fully heal, but also wisdom that could never have been gained through uninterrupted success. In learning to accept help from others, he has become a more effective leader. In confronting his own limitations, he has discovered strength that transcends any individual capability. Gotham City itself begins to heal from the trauma of Azrael's reign, its citizens slowly relearning the skills of community trust and mutual support that harsh authority had systematically discouraged. Crime returns to previous levels, but so does the social resilience that makes crime less attractive as a survival strategy. The true measure of Batman's recovery lies not in his return to previous capabilities, but in his development of new approaches that acknowledge human complexity while still insisting on moral clarity. The man who was broken by Bane and healed through patience emerges as someone capable of inspiring others to become their best selves rather than simply intimidating them into compliance with external authority. Knightfall ends, but its lessons continue to shape Batman's mission for years to come. In learning to fall and rise again, Bruce Wayne has discovered that the greatest heroism lies not in never failing, but in choosing to continue serving others, even when service requires sacrifice that may not be recognized or appreciated by those it benefits. No man's land Gotham cut off. The earthquake that devastates Gotham City strikes with the casual indifference of natural forces that recognize no distinction between the innocent and the guilty, the powerful and the powerless, the heroes and the villains who have waged war across its streets for decades. Measuring 7.6 on the Richter scale, the seismic event transforms Gotham's Gothic architecture into rubble and its carefully maintained social order into chaos that makes previous criminal activity seem quaint by comparison. Bruce Wayne feels the first tremors while reviewing quarterly reports in Wayne Tower's executive suite. the building's steel framework beginning to sing with harmonics that speak of forces beyond human control or engineering solutions. Through floor-to-ceiling windows that have provided commanding views of his city for years, he watches Gotham's skyline transform, in real time, as structures that had stood for centuries collapse, like houses of cards in a hurricane. The Wayne Tower itself, built to exceed all seismic safety standards through Bruce's paranoid attention to disaster preparedness, sways like a ship in heavy seas but maintains structural integrity, while lesser buildings crumble around it. But even the most sophisticated engineering cannot protect against the psychological impact of watching an entire city die in the space of 4 minutes and 37 seconds. "Master Bruce," Alfred's voice carries through the building's emergency communication system with urgency that the unflappable butler rarely allows to surface. The manor's structural integrity is compromised. The cave systems are flooding from broken underground water mains. The reports that follow paint a picture of destruction so comprehensive that it challenges the imagination. Bridges spanning the Gotham River have collapsed into twisted metal sculptures that block shipping traffic indefinitely. The subway system, already aging and poorly maintained, has become a tomb for hundreds of commuters trapped beneath tons of concrete and steel. Gotham General Hospital, where Thomas Wayne once saved lives with the same dedication that his son now brings to saving souls, lies partially collapsed with medical staff trapped in basement levels that may never be safely excavated. But it is the human cost that truly measures the earthquake's impact on Gotham's future. Conservative estimates suggest 10,000 dead in the initial collapse, with thousands more trapped in rubble that will require weeks or months to clear safely. The city's entire emergency response, infrastructure, police, fire, medical, utility has been decimated by damage to buildings, equipment, and personnel that leaves Gotham unable to help itself through conventional means. Commissioner Gordon coordinates rescue efforts from a makeshift command center established in Robinson Park, one of the few open spaces large enough to accommodate the homeless population that has swelled from thousands to hundreds of thousands in a matter of hours. The gruff police veteran moves through the chaos with determination that borders on desperation, knowing that every minute of delay translates to lives that might have been saved with faster response. "We need federal assistance," Gordon tells his remaining officers during a briefing conducted by campfire light while Gotham burns in the distance. The National Guard, FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers, anyone with the resources to mount a disaster response on this scale. But what Gordon doesn't know, what no one in Gotham knows during those first chaotic days, is that federal assistance will not come. The earthquake has created political opportunities that certain elements in Washington have been waiting decades to exploit, chances to address the Gotham problem through methods that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Nicholas Scratch, a congressional aide whose mild appearance conceals ambitions that would impress Machiavelli, presents his analysis to a hastily convened committee with the calm efficiency of someone who has been preparing for this moment his entire career. The committee room, insulated from the chaos consuming Gotham by hundreds of miles and layers of bureaucratic abstraction, feels more like a corporate boardroom than the place where a major American city's fate will be decided. "Gentlemen," Scratch begins, his presentation materials spread across mahogany tables that cost more than most Gotham families earn in a year. "The earthquake has provided us with an unprecedented opportunity to address problems that have plagued federal urban policy for decades." The maps and charts that accompany his briefing reveal Gotham's destruction in clinical detail that strips away human suffering and reduces catastrophe to statistical analysis. Casualty projections, infrastructure damage assessments, economic impact studies, all of it presented with the dispassionate precision of accountants calculating tax liability rather than officials contemplating the abandonment of American citizens. Reconstruction costs are estimated at $400 billion over 10 years. Scratch continues, allowing the staggering figure to settle in minds already skeptical about federal spending on urban renewal. But that assumes we choose to rebuild Gotham according to its previous configuration. Alternative approaches deserve consideration. The alternative approach that Scratch proposes with bureaucratic euphemism boils down to calculated abandonment disguised as fiscal responsibility. Rather than commit federal resources to rebuilding a city whose corruption and crime problems have made it a national embarrassment, the government will declare Gotham uninhabitable, and relocate its surviving population to other urban centers better equipped to absorb displaced persons. The precedent exists in disaster management protocols. Scratch explains to committee members whose districts benefit from defense spending that would be redirected from Gotham reconstruction. We evacuate the salvageable population, seal the borders to prevent return, and allow nature to reclaim land that can be redesignated for more productive purposes. The vote, when it comes, passes by margins that reflect political calculation rather than humanitarian concern. Gotham City, birthplace of American industrialization, and home to millions of citizens whose only crime was living in the wrong place when geological forces shifted beneath their feet, officially ceases to exist as far as the federal government is concerned. The military cordons that seal Gotham's borders appear within 48 hours of the congressional vote, establishing checkpoints that allow evacuation but prevent return. Soldiers who signed up to defend American freedom find themselves enforcing policies that abandon American citizens to whatever fate awaits them in a city cut off from the outside world. But many of Gotham's residents, faced with the choice between abandoning everything they have ever known and taking their chances in a devastated but familiar landscape, choose to stay. Some cannot leave trapped by rubble, injury, or simple inability to travel distances that healthy people could manage easily. Others will not leave bound by ties to place, family, or principle that prove stronger than rational self-preservation. Batman's decision to remain in Gotham surprises no one who truly understands his mission, though it forces him to confront challenges that no amount of training or preparation could have anticipated. With the Batcave flooded and Wayne Manor structurally compromised, Bruce Wayne must rebuild his crime-fighting infrastructure from scratch, while addressing humanitarian crises that dwarf any previous threat to the city's welfare. The irony that Bruce Wayne's vast fortune provides little practical advantage in a cut-off city where traditional economic systems have collapsed entirely does not escape his notice. Money means nothing when there are no functioning banks, no supply chains, no basic services that can be purchased regardless of price. What matters now is knowledge, skill, leadership capability, and the kind of moral authority that can inspire people to cooperate during circumstances that bring out both the best and worst in human nature. Oracle emerges as the most crucial member of the Bat family during Gotham's isolation, her computer skills and information management capabilities providing coordination for rescue efforts across a city whose communication infrastructure has been reduced to whatever equipment she can jury-rig from salvaged electronics. Barbara Gordon, confined to a wheelchair since the Joker's assault, but possessed of intellectual resources that exceed most people's physical capabilities, becomes the nerve center for everything that functions in post-earthquake Gotham. Sector 7 reports successful water purification in the old church basement. Oracle's voice carries through improvised radio networks to teams scattered across the devastated city. They can support maybe 50 people for a week before needing more supplies. Sector 12 has medical personnel trapped in the hospital basement, responds Robin from his position coordinating search and rescue in the financial district. They're alive but running low on oxygen. We need cutting equipment that can get through 3 floors of collapsed concrete. The transformation of Dick Grayson from Batman's sidekick into an independent leader proves one of No Man's Land's few positive developments. At 19, Robin possesses the physical capabilities and tactical knowledge necessary for operating in an environment where mistakes carry lethal consequences. But more importantly, he demonstrates leadership qualities that inspire others to rise above their limitations during circumstances that would break most people's spirits. The criminal elements that survive Gotham's earthquake face the same choices as everyone else: evacuate to uncertain futures in distant cities, or adapt to conditions that make traditional criminal enterprises obsolete. Some choose evacuation, recognizing that their skills translate poorly to environments where law enforcement remains functional. But others see opportunity in chaos, positions of power available to anyone ruthless enough to seize control over scarce resources. The Penguin establishes himself as feudal lord over the museum district, his already substantial organizational skills adapted to managing communities that need leadership more than they need traditional democratic processes. Oswald Cobblepot's criminal background proves paradoxically advantageous in situations where survival requires the kind of decisive action that legal procedures rarely accommodate. Order must be maintained, the Penguin declares to followers who recognize that his harsh methods provide stability in circumstances where chaos means death. Cooperation will be rewarded. Disruption will be eliminated with extreme prejudice. Two-Face claims territory in the courthouse district, with the kind of binary thinking that appeals to people overwhelmed by complex decisions about resource allocation and survival priorities. Harvey Dent's coin-flipping obsession becomes a governance mechanism for communities that need clear answers to impossible questions, even when those answers come from chance rather than wisdom. Heads, we share the medicine equally among all sick children. 2. Face announces to desperate families gathered in the ruins of Gotham's Hall of Justice. Tails, we give it all to the sickest child and hope she survives to help the others later. But it is the Joker who adapts most successfully to No Man's Land's anarchic environment, his philosophy of chaos proving perfectly suited to circumstances where traditional social order has been replaced by survival of the fittest dynamics. The Clown Prince of Crime doesn't claim territory or attempt to govern communities instead. He establishes himself as agent of entropy that ensures no stable social organization can develop among Gotham's survivors. Isn't this wonderful? The Joker cackles as he moves through refugee camps like a plague carrier, spreading despair and paranoia with the same casual efficiency that others might spread news or supplies. All the pretense stripped away, all the comfortable lies revealed as delusions. This is humanity's true face-desperate animals fighting over scraps while their civilization burns around them. Batman's response to these challenges requires him to become something he has never been before, not just a crime fighter or symbol of justice, but a community organizer whose success depends on his ability to inspire ordinary people to cooperate for their mutual benefit. The skills that made him effective against criminals translate imperfectly to leadership roles that require building consensus rather than imposing order through superior capability. The first major test of Batman's new role comes when competing groups claim the same water purification facility, each side armed and desperate enough to fight rather than negotiate. Traditional law enforcement approaches would involve stopping the immediate violence and then referring the dispute to legal authorities for resolution. But with no functional court system and no law enforcement beyond what Batman himself can provide, he must develop alternative methods for resolving conflicts that address underlying needs rather than simply suppressing symptoms. You're all going to die of thirst if you spend your energy fighting each other instead of working together to maintain the equipment. Batman tells the armed groups with authority that derives from moral clarity rather than physical intimidation. But I can't force you to cooperate. I can only point out that cooperation serves your interests better than conflict. The mediation session that follows tests Batman's diplomatic skills in ways that combat training never prepared him for. Leading groups through problem-solving processes that acknowledge legitimate competing needs while identifying mutually beneficial solutions requires patience, empathy, and communication skills that differ fundamentally from the methods he had previously employed against criminal threats. But the success of his intervention, both groups agreeing to share facility access in exchange for shared maintenance responsibilities, demonstrates principles that will guide Batman's approach throughout No Man's Land. People are generally capable of making reasonable decisions when provided with accurate information and genuine choices, even under circumstances that strain human cooperation to its limits. The months that follow test these principles through scenarios that no political science textbook had ever contemplated. Communities form around shared resources, survival needs, and social bonds that transcend previous demographic divisions. The wealthy Gotham Heights socialite works alongside East End gang members to maintain generator equipment that keeps medical facilities operational. The corrupt city councilman who had taken bribes for decades becomes a beloved leader whose organizational skills help coordinate food distribution with scrupulous fairness. Oracle's role as information coordinator proves crucial in preventing the kind of resource wars that desperation might otherwise generate. By maintaining communication between scattered communities and providing accurate data about available supplies, medical needs, and security threats, she helps prevent the hoarding and territorial behavior that scarcity typically encourages. The Bowery community has surplus medical supplies but needs water purification tablets. Oracle reports during one of the daily coordination meetings that Batman holds with community leaders. Sector 15 has purification tablets but needs antibiotics for an outbreak of infection among the children. Can we facilitate a trade? Asks Dr. Leslie Tompkins, who has emerged as one of No Man's Land's most effective leaders, despite having no formal authority beyond her medical expertise and moral credibility. Already in progress, Oracle responds with satisfaction that carries through radio static. Estimated completion by tomorrow afternoon, weather permitting. But perhaps the most significant development during Gotham's isolation involves the gradual emergence of social structures that differ fundamentally from both the city's pre-earthquake governance and the harsh authoritarianism that federal policy had anticipated. Without external law enforcement or formal legal systems, communities develop methods for resolving disputes, allocating resources, and maintaining order that rely more on consensus building and moral persuasion than on hierarchical authority. Batman's role in these developments evolves from active leadership to supportive facilitation, providing security and mediation services that help communities function effectively, while avoiding the kind of domination that would make them dependent on his continued presence. He recognizes that sustainable recovery requires people to develop their own capacity for self-governance, rather than relying on heroic intervention from external sources. They don't need someone to save them. Batman tells Robin during one of their patrol debriefings in the makeshift command center they have established in a partially collapsed office building. They need someone to help them save themselves. The insight proves prophetic, as Gotham's survivor communities demonstrate resilience and adaptability that surprise even Batman with their effectiveness. Children attend schools taught by volunteer teachers in buildings maintained through community labor. Medical care continues through networks of healthcare workers who share resources and expertise across territorial boundaries. Food production develops in urban gardens that transform rubble-filled lots into productive agricultural space. But the most remarkable development involves the gradual emergence of justice systems that address crime and conflict through methods that prioritize restoration over punishment, community healing over individual vengeance. When conflicts arise, and they inevitably do, given the stress and scarcity that define post-earthquake, life communities develop mediation processes that seek to address underlying needs and repair social relationships rather than simply imposing consequences on wrongdoers. "We can't afford to waste people by putting them in prison," explains Father Gabriel, a Catholic priest whose church serves as both spiritual center and community meeting space for one of the larger survivor groups. "Everyone we have is needed for survival. But we also can't tolerate behavior that threatens everyone's welfare. So we find ways to change behavior while keeping people connected to the community that needs them." The approaches that emerge prove more effective than traditional criminal justice at reducing recidivism and maintaining social order, though they require levels of community engagement and shared responsibility that would be difficult to maintain under normal circumstances. People who might otherwise resort to theft or violence find themselves supported by social networks that address their underlying needs while holding them accountable for their impact on others. Batman's observation of these developments profoundly influences his understanding of what justice can look like when communities possess both the motivation and authority necessary for authentic self-governance. The methods that prove most effective in No Man's Land share characteristics that he recognizes from his study of restorative justice practices, conflict resolution techniques, and community organizing principles that prioritize healing over punishment. But No Man's Land's isolation cannot continue indefinitely, and federal authorities eventually recognize that their abandonment policy has created political liabilities that exceed any benefits gained from avoiding reconstruction costs. Reports of successful community development in the cut-off city contradict official narratives about urban dysfunction and federal necessity, creating pressure for policy changes that acknowledge reality rather than ideology. The decision to reopen Gotham comes not from humanitarian recognition, but from practical acknowledgement that the federal government cannot indefinitely maintain military cordons around a major American city without facing constitutional challenges that threaten broader policy objectives. But the year of isolation has transformed both Gotham and its residents in ways that will influence the city's future long after traditional government services have been restored. Batman emerges from No Man's Land, changed by his experience of community leadership in ways that deepen his understanding of justice and heroism. The man who had always fought crime through individual action discovers that sustainable social change requires collective effort and shared responsibility that exceed any individual capability, however exceptional. We saved the city. Robin observes as they watch the first federal relief convoys enter Gotham through checkpoints that are finally being dismantled. No, Batman corrects with wisdom earned through a year of learning to lead through service rather than domination. The city saved itself. We just helped create conditions where that became possible. The distinction proves crucial as Gotham begins the long process of rebuilding not just its physical infrastructure, but its social and political systems based on lessons learned during the year when its people discovered they could govern themselves more effectively than distant authorities had ever managed. No Man's Land ends, but its legacy of community resilience and participatory democracy continues to influence Gotham's development for years to come. In learning to facilitate rather than control, Batman has discovered approaches to justice that transcend individual heroism while making individual heroism more meaningful through its connection to collective efforts for social healing and community development. The earthquake that nearly destroyed Gotham has inadvertently created opportunities for rebuilding the city according to principles that serve human flourishing rather than abstract institutional authority.